Okay, we are on the air. Welcome. Welcome to the December 6th, 2016 Board of Supervisors meeting. Could you all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Pine?
Here.
Supervisor Groom?
Present.
Supervisor Horsley?
Here.
Supervisor Ticia? President Slocum?
Here. Thank you. We move to public comment. Mr. Clerk?
Public comment is reserved for persons wishing to address the board on any county-related matters that are as follows: not otherwise on the meeting agenda, as well as listed on the consent agenda. Speakers are customarily limited to 2 minutes, but an extension may be provided by the board president. So first speaker we have is Martin Fox.
Board, my fellow veteran, Mr. Maltby, and County Council, Mr. Byers. Thank you for your service to our county. And thank you for authorizing Laura's Law, also known as assisted outpatient treatment. Please improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the outpatient treatment provided by Laura's Law by waiving all of the civil and criminal immunities that the intellectually and morally bankrupt Lanterman-Peacher Short Act provides to those who decide to limit or deny treatment to persons living with serious mental illness that have not experienced multiple hospitalizations, incarcerations, or violent episodes, but yet remain a danger to themselves or others. Laura's Law, or assisted outpatient treatment, is a more compassionate response than the Lanterman-Peacher Short Act is to those who live with serious mental illness that is complicated by an inability to understand their need for treatment, as well as their family members, law enforcement, and others affected by the adverse consequences of the multiple hospitalizations, incarcerations, or violent acts which the Lanterman-Peacher Short Act requires before treatment is provided. Reject the recovery racketeers' self-serving misstatements of fact and misrepresentations of law, who profit from the Lanterman-Peacher Short Act's revolving doors of the psychiatric emergency room, jail, the streets, and even the morgue, at the risk and expense of the mentally ill, their family members, taxpayers, law enforcement, and the public. Please improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the outpatient treatment Laura's Law provides by waiving all of the civil and criminal immunities that the Lanterman-Peacher Short Act gives to those who decide to limit or deny treatment to persons living with serious mental illness that have not experienced multiple hospitalizations, incarcerations, or violent episodes, but remain a danger to themselves or others. Thank you.
Next we have Mayor from Half Moon Bay, Rick Kovalchek, followed by Cheryl Fan.
Good morning, President Slocum and supervisors. It's my honor to be here today, just showing my support and representing Half Moon Bay for item 20 on your consent agenda, the funding for the Half Moon Bay Library. You might not think this to be a controversial issue. You might think building a new library would have unanimous support, and of course you would be wrong. This is a project 10 years in the making or more, and without our collaboration, it would not have happened. So I'm here to give my support. I'm here to thank you for your help along the way. All the supervisors have contributed, and Carol, I know you have been particularly personally involved in the project, and thank you for that, and Don and Adrian and Dave, everybody, I really appreciate your support. We have representation from our city council here today and our city manager, and with us we bring dozens and dozens and dozens of letters and words of support from our community for this project. I feel confident, and I hope it goes through. We will take on this item at our city council meeting tonight, but I'm here just to show support, and again, thank you once again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next we have Cheryl Fan, followed by Ron Snow.
Good morning, members of the board and county council. I am Cheryl Fan, and I speak on behalf of dozens of residents of the University Park neighborhood in Menlo Park. You've been provided a letter via email and in person today, signed by 44 of us. We recently organized to discuss the need for increased safety measures along the Santa Cruz Avenue corridor that travels through unincorporated Menlo Park, specifically the stretch that runs from the Sandhill Road to the Alameda. The impetus for us organizing was the receipt of a notice from the Department of Public Works in August that informed us that a proposal would come before you in which parking along this stretch of Santa Cruz Avenue would be restricted from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays to enhance the safety of bikers. This led many of my neighbors and myself to ask, how did this proposal come to be? How can we improve safety for the residents of our neighborhood who drive, bike, and walk, not just to those traveling through on bikes? What followed was a multitude of phone calls, emails, online searches, and discussions with members of your staff, DPW, and the California Highway Patrol. What I learned is that the process to date has had no clear procedural approach, has not been transparent, and has been inaccurate. Specifically, the information provided by DPW has been vague and limited. There has been minimal research into alternatives to enhance safety to drivers and pedestrians. The notice provided to homeowners of the proposed parking restriction went to a very narrow range of homes. Those residents on streets most likely to absorb increased parking were not notified and not allowed to have a voice in this process. Perhaps most disheartening is that the parking ban proposed was removed from the November 1st agenda and rerouted to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee on October 20th without appropriate notice. At that meeting, a non-existent proposal was approved to move forward to a vote by you, the board, tentatively in January. When I reached out to your staff recently to get at what was voted on, this is when I was informed that a concrete proposal has yet to be written. So at this point, my neighbors and I are alarmed at the lack of process in the creation and vote of a parking restriction without reading it, without assessing alternatives, and without engaging the very community affected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ron Snow, followed by Michelle G.
Good morning, President, Supervisors. My name is Ron Snow. I've been a neighbor in the neighborhood for about 40 years, and I'm asking you to support requiring DPW to do a thorough and professional assessment of the safety in our neighborhood along Santa Cruz Avenue, and something that extends longer than the Sand Hill to Alameda extension. Something on your map there that you've been presented with, you see a solid red line, and this is what this is about a 1,000-foot segment. What we'd like to have is a safety assessment that goes from Sand Hill Road all the way to A.B. Avenue. If you're familiar with that area, there's a split in Santa Cruz Avenue that starts Alameda. Okay. DPW is aware and acknowledges that there are serious safety issues along this section of roadway and its intersections. Yet after decades, there's been little done. In the first death that occurred, DPW's only response was to actually remove the traffic signs that indicated that there was a crosswalk approaching. In the second death, it's unclear. This is the second death that occurred a few months ago. It's unclear what DPW's reaction is going to be. In the letter that was provided you, there were several things that were listed there. And it's sort of telling, in a disappointing way, that those items, that we had to list those items, because those items include a professional assessment of what's happening in the neighborhood. We want a full analysis. We want safety to be addressed. We want the defined corridor to be something more than just 1,000-foot section, but something that is comprehensive in the area. We want this to be a transparent process that includes us as well. I mean, we've lived in the neighborhood for so long that we know the issues and understand the kind of behaviors that are happening in that area. And the other points are there, and I ran out of time, but it is important that we get your sponsorship to have DPW do a quality product that is required of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Michelle G., followed by Raina Lehman.
Good morning. My name is Michelle G., and I've lived at 2149 Santa Cruz Avenue since 1999. To follow on Cheryl and Ron, I just want to highlight that actually removing parking spots on Santa Cruz Avenue has safety ramifications which haven't been considered and need to before presenting any sort of proposal to you. First is increased speed. Removing parked cars from Santa Cruz will make this portion look like a 5-lane highway and surely increase speed. This impacts bikers cycling next to faster traffic, as well as the safety to bikers and cars when residents back out of their driveways into faster traffic. Second is the safety to residents and their visitors walking to their cars several blocks away. When we can't park on Santa Cruz, the next nearest street is Stanford Avenue. The closest access to Stanford is Palo Alto Way, which is a dangerous road for pedestrians, especially during the evening rush hour and when it's dark early in the winter. It's actually an alley. There's barely enough room for 2 cars to pass each other, and there are no sidewalks or lights. There hasn't been any consideration of this safety hazard to residents having to walk to Stanford Avenue, and certainly none to residents with less mobility or handicapped residents or those with daily caregivers. Third, some Santa Cruz Avenue residents park on their street in front of their house because they feel it's safer for them to pull forward into traffic rather than backing out of their driveway perpendicular to oncoming traffic. We don't want our neighbors who are hesitant to back out of their driveways because they're not comfortable with backing into high-speed traffic to start doing this. That's not safe for any of us. Eliminating these parking spots actually has a major safety impact to bikers, residents, pedestrians, and other cars, and DPW hasn't done anything to evaluate this. We're asking that you direct them to look into this and to engage us in the process. Thank you.
Next speaker is Raina Lehman, followed by our last speaker, Brent Turner.
Good morning, distinguished supervisors and staff. I'm very excited to speak in support of County Manager's Report, item number 9, with great appreciation to Supervisor Tissier for bringing a recommendation to you to support TIP, the Trades Introduction Program. Via TIP, we have created a viable and successful pathway for county residents, women, veterans, at-risk youth, and underserved populations in particular to enter state-certified construction apprenticeship programs, forge good careers with family-sustaining wages and benefits. We look forward to working with the Human Service Agency and the County Manager's Office and all of you. We again express deep appreciation to Supervisor Tissier for all she's done all the years for working families, for workers in our county, and her vision in supporting this particular program, the Trades Introduction Program. We're going to miss you. We're going to miss working with you and your wonderful staff. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Brent Turner.
Good morning, supervisors. Good morning, county officials. I wanted to come before you today. I think we've now all witnessed in the news cycles the issues occurring nationally with the election systems and the recounts and all. I just wanted to bring forward again the issue regarding San Mateo County and our leadership surrounding these particular election systems. As you know, San Francisco County has moved forward allocating funds toward safe and secure open source software election systems. And again, I wanted to encourage our county to move forward in unison with San Francisco County and show leadership here. The Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, is paying attention to not only San Francisco, but surrounding counties to see if there is the enthusiasm around this project. So we want to make sure we are not only leading the state of California, but also the rest of the country as the country looks to California for leadership when it comes to election systems. I think for the sake of our democracy, we would be well served by this Board of Supervisors moving forward, having conversations with the Department of Elections and also San Francisco County. you enjoy a beneficial situation because Supervisor Slocum is an expert in these matters and can lead the country forward. He is actually a national expert on this point, so he understands software and the ramifications of having a secret corporate-owned software rather than open source. Our findings are in compatibility with the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense. We need to secure the voting systems to have a proper democracy. It'll save the county money and move the country forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. We ought to have you back more often.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum.
Thank you for the comments. I appreciate it. That was the last public speaker, yes? Okay, good.
Can I just make a quick comment but regarding my constituents about that Menlo Park neighborhood? It's actually not DPW's fault. It's actually probably me. It's not that I want to necessarily take away parking. It's that there's a group of bicyclists that came to us and wanted to see if, because there's a lot of bicycle traffic on that road. I've gone out a couple times and looked at the traffic. It does go fast. There is a lot of people using bicycles. It is hazardous in a way. I asked them to look at a variety of different things, and it's a long way from making any kind of a decision. But we looked at, can you make the lanes narrower? Can you get rid of the center line? Is there some way to make it safer? So I'm glad you came today, but I just wanted to know it's not their fault, and we will kind of go through a really longer process, and certainly will involve the neighborhood as well. I'm sorry, public comment is over. I just want to let you know that it's not really their fault, and your comments are, I guarantee you, were heard.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you all for coming. We'll move now to the section presentations and awards, and the first item, I'm sorry, we need to move to set the agenda first.
I'll move to set the agenda and to approve the consent agenda items.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Now we'll move to item number 1, which is a presentation on oral health developments, and Supervisor Pine will lead that conversation.
Thank you, Supervisor Slocum. Over the last year or two, a tremendous amount of work has been done in the county concerning dental care, often referred to as oral health care. Access to dental care is one of the least accessible health services in the county. And when you have poor oral health care, it has big ramifications for your life. If you're a kid, it can affect your attendance at school. And if you're an adult, if you have poor teeth, it affects your ability to interview. And many people in our county live in pain because they can't access dental care. So over the last year or 18 months, there's been a major initiative to develop a strategic plan for oral health care, one that has not been, we have not had such a plan for, I think, in excess of 10 years. And it's been a tremendous collaborative effort that's come together to put this plan together. So you'll hear about that today. And also we have a very exciting event coming up in April of next year called CDA Cares, which will be co-sponsored by the county and the California Dental Association, which will, over a weekend in April at the event center, dentists from around the state will, and particularly our county, will volunteer to provide free dental care to our residents and residents from adjoining areas. So with that, let me introduce the folks who've done all the hard work. We have Yogita Tharkar, of course, Anne Marie Sylvester, and Anand Chatra. So I'll turn it over to you.
So thank you, Supervisor Pine. Thank you, President Slocum, members of the board, Mr. Maltby, Mr. Byers. We really appreciate the time on the agenda to talk a little bit about oral health in San Mateo County. Supervisor Pine has told you who we are. I'm the medical director at Family Health Services in San Mateo County Health System. Dr. Silvestri is the dental director at the San Mateo Medical Center, dental program manager, and Dr. Thakur is the chief dental officer at Ravenswood Family Health Center. I had to get the title correct. So with that, moving to the presentation. So the Oral Health Coalition has been around a long time looking at oral health issues, particularly education and access. It's been around for about 30 years with this goal of improving the oral health status of underserved populations and vulnerable populations. participation of this strategic plan is welcome to join us. The plan itself is really about improving the oral health of all San Mateo County residents. We had great participation in this process, over 35 agencies involved. It was a 9-month planning process, and you see the product in front of you with the strategic plan. We now have printed form and up on the websites. It covers all populations, so unlike some of the other strategic plans you've seen in neighboring counties which have focused on children, ours is about children, pregnant women, adults, and the elderly. So it's really a comprehensive plan. It is fairly ambitious, but we really felt it was important to put something out there that really tried to address all the needs of all populations. And it really has a focus on prevention of dental disease. So while it doesn't ignore treatment, it's really about prevention through education, collaboration, and increasing access. And it really seeks to build on existing models that are been successful elsewhere in the United States and in California. I'm pleased to report that we have received funding from several partners to have 2 staff positions, term positions, to implement this plan. And we're finishing up the hiring process for the Oral Health Strategic Plan Director position. So that will start shortly. And now we'll talk a little bit about oral health services, so the service delivery system in the county. It's really about eliminating health disparities, and 2 of the major providers are the federally qualified health centers, San Mateo Medical Center, as you know, as well as Ravenswood Family Health Center. So San Mateo Medical Center has 4 sites with dental services, plus the mobile dental clinic, and then Ravenswood has the large site in East Palo Alto. And with that, I'll pass it on to Dr. Silvestri.
So I've spoken to you many times about dental, so here I am again. So as you know, we have 5 locations if we count the mobile dental clinic, which has 20 chairs in it. We offer emergency services every morning. So if you're in pain, a patient in pain, no matter what their financial status, and who we take care of is usually the low income, can come to any of our clinics and be taken care of and gotten out of pain. The problem is what happens after that. So we are doing a comprehensive program that's for adults and children. In 2013, we had over 17,000 patient visits in our clinics, and 2016, it's getting closer to 19,000. So we're really on a roll upward. But there's still a lot of people not taken care of. We have a wait list of over 1,200 people to get in for comprehensive care. We also provide a service for patients that are going to have joint replacements or have any cardiac problems, that they're cleared for dental before their surgeries take place. We offer a very comprehensive program that for our county, but it's still not enough. In addition to this, we have just gotten 6 chairs in the correctional facility. So with Maple Street opening in January, we'll have 2 dental chairs there and be able to provide dental services 5 days a week for correctional health. So we're on a roll up. Last year, we provided over $2 million worth of dental services, but the county is in tremendous need for more. So with that, I'll have Yogita talk about Ravenswood.
So Ravenswood Family Health Center, we're located in East Palo Alto. We have a total of 14 clinical operatories, 12 of which are in our exclusive dental site, and 2 are co-located in our medical clinic and our newly opened medical facility. The focus is prevention and restorative and rehabilitative care so that people can get comprehensive dental services. In addition to our fixed clinic sites, we also have a program called the Virtual Dental Home. Virtual Dental Home is supported with funding from First 5, and it's a program that provides basic prevention services for children in their Head Start, in preschools and Head Starts. We are at present in 25 classrooms in all of San Mateo County, all the way from Serramonte and Daly City down to East Palo Alto and on the coast in Pescadero and other sites in Half Moon Bay. We offer one thing that we have that is unique to Ravenswood is that we provide sedation and general anesthesia for children who have extensive dental needs or children who have very complicated health histories or medical conditions which need for them to be treated under general anesthesia. That is that's very unique at a health center, not just in San Mateo County, but actually in all of California. We are a serve as a referral resource for other clinics that serve children in all of San Mateo County and for Lucille Packard Children's Hospital as well. And I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Silvestri to talk about the Dental Transformation Initiative.
So this is something that we've applied for as a county in collaboration with Ravenswood, with University of the Pacific in San Francisco, to get the virtual dental home to come to the medical center. This is a very ambitious project, and I'm a little bit nervous of it myself. It's over about $7 million in a grant funding that we would receive if we get this over 4 years. It would provide comprehensive, not so much comprehensive care, but preventative care. We would be able to take dental services into the pediatric clinics so that a child that goes to their physician for their yearly checkup would also get a dental checkup at the same time. That is the biggest thing that we're doing. It also provides something that's called CAMBRA, which we will be initiating in the county anyway. But CAMBRA is risk assessment, and we would be able to tell in which category the child is in terms of decay and to help eliminate the problems, because our goal is to get prevention. DTI, as this is called, is very child-oriented, while our strategic plan is oriented for all ages, from children to seniors. So excited about this, but nervous about this. I think the good news is that they did request more information from us. The first 80 pages weren't enough, so we sent in about 25 more. So we're hoping that means that we're going somewhere with this. We mentioned CDA Cares. Supervisor Groom, we've come a long way from, is this for real? So yeah, I've gotten more involved in it than we really wanted to, but it's sponsored by the California Dental Association. CDA Cares happens twice a year in the state. This next go around in April, San Mateo was selected. It's going to be at the Event Center, April 21st through 24th, with the 21st and the 24th being set up and takedown days. They anticipate about 18,000 volunteers, not all of whom are dentists. Food services, everything has to be taken care of, labs and everything else. 2,000 patients are anticipated to come. All services are provided free to both, and there's no one they're all done by volunteers, so there's no money transferred in that way. That being said, it costs a lot to put these things on too. So they anticipate $2 million worth of dental services that day, because that's happened in the past. People will get dentures, one-day dentures out of this. They'll get extractions. There are people that follow CDA Cares. They'll have their extractions done in one county, their dentures done in another county, and this goes through. So just to think how it would be to have to go wait in line at 3 o'clock in the morning to get into a dental appointment. So with that, I'd like to show you, I'm hoping this works now, a little clip, you've got it, of CDA Cares that happened in Sacramento in, I think it was November of 15.
I was watching the news, so I jumped in the car, drove here like 75 miles an hour so I could get over here, and I slept on the grass over there with my dog.
I'm a school portrait photographer, so I'm telling kids to smile all day, and it's hard, because I have to smile and show them, but then I'm showing them my teeth, and it's kind of embarrassing. So
I got Medi-Cal, but they won't pay for caps and partials and stuff like that. It's real frustrating, especially when I'm trying to eat and I'm in pain.
What time did you get here? 6:30 yesterday morning. Oh my goodness. The first group, the first 60, so please follow me. Here we go.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's the mission of the CDA Foundation to improve the oral health of all Californians and to help our members in that end.
as soon as they enter this building, they see that there's people here that really care. They aren't here because they're getting paid. They're not here because they have to. They're here because they care about other people.
How many times are we supposed to be brushing every day?
There's a need because the state has kind of dropped the ball. I mean, we have a Medi-Cal system that's broken, and we know that patients are not able to get the care they need. We know that people have infection and disease, and it's untreated. Smile. CDA Cares is more than just a number of patients we see. It's really the moments that all kind of come together, kind of like a collage of all these little special moments where we're looking in their eyes and we know that we made a difference.
I think CDA Cares is important for many reasons. One of the reasons, though, is to shine a light about this problem and let our legislators come and see that there really are people that lives are being affected by their poor oral health. Unfortunately, the greatest need is the dental extractions that we're doing here in Sacramento. And because of the underfunded Denti-Cal program, there's not access for people to go in and get routine cleanings and the education they need to know how to save their teeth.
I'd just like to thank the CDA. It's one thing for us to donate and volunteer, which we enjoy, but if they weren't the driving force behind this, a lot of these patients wouldn't have access to the care.
I have never had my cleaning before. It was pretty good, yeah. It was kind of painful, but I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you for your fantastic service. It was awesome.
I want to say thank you to everybody that volunteers. You guys don't know what you do for people. You really don't. Or maybe you do. That's why you're here. Thank you.
If you open up this avenue in your heart and with your profession, you will find that it's rewarding beyond belief.
The slogan is, it's the best thing we do. It's true, it really is.
So I want to thank you, but I do also want to put in another plug. The Denti-Cal system is not working in California, and if it weren't for FQHCs like Ravenswood and San Mateo Medical Center, it would be even more desperate than it is. And with this, we'd all like to thank you for having us here today. We want to thank our sponsors, thank you, who helped us and will help us get through this journey to bring oral health improvement to San Mateo County. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you for sharing that video. That was moving. Thank you. Thank you, Louisa.
And if I could just conclude, this is this incredible team of people who have, really gone above and beyond to, push this plan and to, take on this challenge which the state is neglecting. And again, special recognition of Lee Michelson, who's chaired the Oral Coalition. Brian Lehey is here, who's kind of helped tremendously. And the funding for the staff is coming from 4 sources: Peninsula Healthcare District, Sequoia Healthcare District, the San Mateo County Health Plan, and First 5. So in the county spirit, really good collaboration.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Pine. Thank you for your leadership in making that 18 months worth of effort.
18 months, 2 years. Time goes by fast.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. Go ahead. Please. And you'll fill out a card if you could.
Sure. Good evening, Honorable Board of Supervisors. My name is Beatrice Rodriguez. And what I want to share is I've been with the county 28 years. And I started in I started in San Mateo County in 1989, and I've had a beautiful career here at San Mateo County, working with the community. I'm here to save the honor of my family that's going to be splattered all over the paper soon. Basically, my first husband was incarcerated, And I went through a lot of the ACEs, the adult, or what is it, the adult child adversities, whatever the county is talking about these days. About my daughter, of course, has autism, and it has a lot to do with all her distress because I was a single parent. Once my husband was incarcerated, they basically said that when he went to his health care, which I don't have to name here, they said that they didn't know what came first, his mental illness or his alcoholism. But today he's sober, okay? My ex-husband is sober, and he's been sober for a year, and he's going to reunite with my daughter because, you see, the plan is that at the county I've been mocked for the last 2 years. My second husband, which I've been married for 10 years, has been under surveillance, as well as my house. And I'm sure they put a little prostitute for him. Okay, so basically I've been going to work every day for 2 years. And the entire staff has turned against me. They've been laughing at me and asking me, I'm getting calls from my clients that are being turned around and I'm being told from my clients, oh, I have a problem with my husband. And I'm like, you know what's the greatest part is just being okay with yourself. We don't really need men. You got to love yourself. So, just let him do what he needs to do and whatever, But what they were really talking about is they were watching videos and surveillance of my home and watching my husband go play golf like he did this weekend. And the neighbor to lives to the right, Mrs. Irene Broderick.
Thank you. You'll have to wrap up. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, I just want to say that, again, this is political. My whole family is coming down. They've investigated my entire family to find out any kind of dirty laundry. And I don't know the laws here. I don't have a lawyer. I'm not going to get a lawyer. I already told my husband he's going to hang by his you-know-what.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And I just want to thank the county, and especially Mr. Moppy. I think you're great. And I really like how you sat there with me the day of, women in county government, the rise and fall of Latinos. I want to thank you. I think you're very honorable. And I'm going to stick around if anybody wants to talk to me.
All right. We'll move on to item number 2 now, if that's okay with everybody. Item number 2 is a presentation of resolutions honoring the 2016 Women in County Government Award recipients, and Supervisor Groom is going to lead this conversation.
Thank you, President Slocum. I have the really great duty today to comment a little bit on the 26th annual holiday recognition of women in government. This is an organization that's been around. It started 26 years ago to help mentor and encourage women to reach higher, especially at their career level, and to have find sources of assistance throughout our entire organization to help them do that. And it's now a great tradition that we have in this county and celebrate it every year. We honored 3 women yesterday. And the 3 awards are, the first is called Rookie of the Year. It's an award given to an individual who has been employed with the county for 5 years or less and provides exemplary performance, commitment to the employees department. The second award is the Development Champion. And this award is given to an individual who is distinguished by personal and professional development. As a result, she has helped many others to achieve the development that she has taken on. And the last but not least is public service, called the Extra Mile. And the winner of this award exemplifies excellent service. She demonstrates reliability, communicates constructively, listens actually, and functions as a participant in her department, helping others to achieve premier service and superior employee habits. And so with that, I would like to introduce the Rookie of the Year, who is Felicia Flores from the Human Resources Department. The Development Champion is not with us today, but her husband is, Alma Zamora, and Captain Tom and Chief Gallagher will represent her. And our public service, the extra mile, is Jessica Stanfill Mullen. We have resolutions from the county honoring them, and also we have resolutions from the state legislature, and our Assemblyman Kevin Mullen is here to help pass these out.
That's okay. Just a photographer today. Okay.
As part of the function from yesterday, there was an opportunity to purchase some tickets and win some prizes, and that reaped over $2,000. Nice. And that $2,000 will be divided among the 3 charities selected by our 3 honorees. So again, I think that the count, when you see the amount of women that we had nominated and our three winners, the county is in good hands, and we have lots of people who want to help everybody to get even better. Thanks. So thank you, Mr. Slocum.
Thank you.
Mr. President, we do need a motion for this.
I always forget that. Always. I would like to make a motion that we approve the resolution honoring the 2016 Women in Government Award recipients.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let me just say a word or two. Congratulations to all the recipients, the program, supervisor, groom, and HR department, and women in county government yesterday was awesome. Unfortunately, I didn't win any of the raffle prizes.
Too bad.
But I know you two did. And let me just say that I'm very proud. I shared this with Supervisor Groom yesterday that Jessica Mullen actually started in my old department, the assessor's department. She was there for about 6 months and proved herself obviously very capable and went on to much bigger and better things. So Jessica, thank you for that service. Also, just a word about Kevin, if I could. For those of you that are on Twitter, last night we tweeted out the winners, and Kevin retweeted one of the tweets on Jessica, and the hashtag was Proud Hubby. Awesome, Kevin. So I don't know if any other supervisors want to make a comment on the program yesterday.
I'm just sorry you're jealous that you didn't win a prize like I did. I did manage to win an autographed picture of Ian Clark from the Warriors. So if you want to see it, who's he?
For the right things, I could share mine with you, Supervisor Slogan.
Okay, we'll do that. Thank you all. Appreciate it. And congratulations once again to the award winners.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yep.
Felicia Flores, the last time I saw her, she caught a ball with her face.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, she did.
She actually got knocked out, but she did not drop the ball. So she's all right. She's great. And Captain Zamora, I wish her the best. I know she has some trials and tribulations now with a personal illness. But the last I saw of her, she was working for East Palo Alto, and then went to the Sheriff's Department's made a really rapid rise and has proven herself to be a real valuable asset to the Sheriff's Department. And Jessica, both Warren and I have worked with her over the past, I guess almost a year and a half on our Job Housing Gap Task Force, and now it's the Home for All. And she is really outstanding. And Peggy put together really an outstanding team. It's really been a pleasure working with her and you, Peggy.
Thank you, Supervisor. Back to Felicia.
I may just add, it was a terrific event. It's really kicks off the holiday season. And we had many nominees, also just as outstanding contributors to the county, so the selection is always very difficult. And I'll also point out that their little party favors, like there was a glass with marshmallows and a candy cane, and my kids loved that. So they benefited as well.
All right.
Very good. Thank you all very much. Congratulations once again. Move on to the regular agenda now. Item number 3, which is a Measure A resolution authorizing an agreement with Seton Medical Center for seismic upgrades for the term of January 1st, 2017 through December 15th, 2030 in an amount not to exceed $15 million.
President Slocum, I'll be presenting this item today. Staff is in fact recommending approval of this resolution authorizing an agreement with Seton Medical Center under which if approved, the county will provide an amount of $15 million towards Seton's obligation to perform seismic upgrades. As this board is, of course, fully aware, in 2012, the county electorate approved Measure A, which, and if you look at the body of Measure A, it actually contemplated and foreshadowed a number of ways that the county might spend the additional sales tax that's derived from Measure A. One of the items specifically called out and identified in that measure was the notion that the county might spend a substantial, the term substantial was used in Measure A, a substantial amount of funding to help sustain Seton Hospital as a nonprofit safety net provider. And as you also know, the voters by a very wide margin approved Measure A. Now, subsequent to the passage of Measure A, the board, in fact, did appropriate substantial monies to Seton Hospital to help ensure its continued viability and stature as an important North County healthcare asset. And in part, they serve Medi-Cal patients. Recently, of course, Measure A was extended by the voters who adopted Measure K. As you are also aware, in 2015, the Daughters of Charity sold Seton and its other hospitals. The sale was conditionally approved by then Attorney General Kamala Harris in, I believe, December of 2015, so 1 year ago. So the current structure is, as I understand it, is as follows. And if I get this wrong, there are people from Seton here who can correct me. It's a pretty layered corporate structure, but as I understand it, the way it's structured is as follows. Seton Medical Center is a nonprofit hospital with its own board of directors. Seton Hospital is an affiliate of and is owned by a nonprofit known as Verity Health System of California, Inc. So Verity is really acting as the new Daughters of Charity. They're essentially the new Daughters of Charity. Verity is managed by a company called Integra Healthcare LLC, which is an affiliate of Blue Mountain Capital Management, Inc., which is a for-profit corporation. Now, Blue Mountain paid for an option to acquire Verity Health System anytime between December 2018 and December 2030. So they paid for that option to essentially privatize Verity Health System. Now, per state law, Seton must complete certain seismic upgrades by 2020, and I believe there's even more stringent requirements for seismic upgrades by 2030. Seton estimates the total cost to be roughly $60 to $65 million. In order to assist Seton to continue to provide healthcare services to residents in the northern part of the county, staff is recommending that the board enter into an agreement with Seton where the county will make a total contribution of $15 million in grants available to Seton to meet its seismic upgrade legal requirements. If approved, the county would make $5 million available for each of the next 3 fiscal years, starting in this fiscal year, 2016 to 2017. Now, the funds would only be released to Seton upon presentation of invoices, establishing that Seton has actually incurred, qualifying expenses related to seismic work. So there's a whole process in place to ensure that, a process that's actually embedded in the contract to ensure that the money is being spent properly, for seismic work. The agreement also contains a second protection of the county funds, In the event that Seton ceases to operate as a nonprofit hospital prior to 2030, Seton will be required to return money to the county, kind of on a sliding formula. And per this formula, the money that would be due and owing and returned to the county would be the amount the county already paid minus 10% per year for a 10-year period, okay, beginning in fiscal year 2019-20. Finally, if Seton is sold to a for-profit company and they're required to return the county money, so now they're now privatized and they have to return the county money minus, again, the 10% per year for 10 years, the agreement would allow Seton to pay back the money in 4 waves at 25% a year over a 4-year period. So they pay back in kind of in tranches, but ultimately in full, minus the 10% per year. So that's how the agreement is structured. So again, to summarize here, staff is asking that you approve this resolution providing funds to Seton as a recognition of the important role that Seton plays as a safety net provider in San Mateo County and to help ensure its continuing viability. If I can just make one more comment. I was reviewing the materials this morning and I noticed in the resolution in the second to last whereas clause, the term misstates, the term of the agreement states 2013. It should have stated 2030. If it weren't in the resolution, I would have let it go, but it's in the resolution. So I would ask that if the board approves this agreement, that in conjunction with the motion to approve, you make that correction to change the term from 2013 to 2030, which is what it should have stated. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to
Thank you, Mr. Byers. Comments, questions? Supervisor Pine.
I had a couple of questions. I mean, to begin with, I'm supportive of the transaction and had a chance to talk at some length with John Farrelly, and I think he's doing a great job with the Seton services. And this structure is certainly creative and appropriate, given that Seton is a nonprofit now, but could become a for-profit. So, John, my question is, with in the event that the Seton becomes a for-profit, and the money doesn't actually come back, right?
Well, it comes back in the form of grants that the county manager, with approval of the board of supervisors, can decide how to direct. So money does come back, but it's characterized as grant money that the county manager, again, with authority from the board, can determine how to direct for programs that benefit the citizens of San Mateo County.
Okay, so that would come back with the county manager's recommendation to the board.
Correct.
And my other question is, could you talk a little bit about what would happen if Seton was acquired by another nonprofit? So it's there are some nonprofits which are big and mighty and
Right.
could be. You wonder why they're not for profit.
Right. Well, pursuant to the agreement, the contract. This contract would be assigned to the new nonprofit, so they would continue the obligations of the current nonprofit.
And
no money. Right.
But if they didn't want to take the contract, what would happen then?
John, you want to address that, the issue of the money not returning?
Good morning. I'm John Niblin with the Office of County Counsel. If, in fact, another nonprofit were to assume control of Seton, there's nothing in the agreement that would require that money come back to the county in a circumstance like that. The tripwire for money coming back to the county would be Seton becoming a for-profit. So, again, if it was another nonprofit that assumed control of Seton, then the agreement itself would not require any sort of grant money to come back to the county.
Assuming but the nonprofit would have to be obliged or obligated under this contract, wouldn't they?
That is true, Supervisor. That is true.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Nibbler. Supervisor Tisia?
I just want to say, being from the North County, Seton is a very vital asset to us in the North County, and I really do think we've been talking about this idea of making sure they're seismically retrofitted as soon as possible within the guidelines of the state, and I do think this is an important day and time for them. And they do handle a lot of Medi-Cal patients up there, and it's a very busy hospital, and so I'm very pleased that we're at this point. And I'll wait till the other comments, but I certainly would like to make a motion to support the measure.
Thank you. Other comments?
Well,
Supervisor?
Basically, as you all know, actually, I grew up in Daly City, so I basically remember when Seton was first built, and I knew how important it was to the city. And it actually, Daly City is the largest city in the county, and they really need to have a hospital. The other is that on the whole North End, and I represent part of the North End of Pacifica, Seton is really their hospital. On the coast side, Seton Coast Side provides a valuable service not only to people who are basically skilled nursing facility, but also an emergency room, the only emergency room on that coast side. So I am in agreement with this agreement with Seton Hospital as well. I also want to commend John Farrelly that, I know when basically the daughters essentially sold the hospital, we were concerned about, would this hospital continue to provide services to our residents, and they have. And I know the organization, the staff at the new management has actually done a really good job of turning the whole facility around. We're very concerned with to make sure that both Seton continues, that it continues providing service to low-income residents, and we especially want to make sure that we continue with an emergency room on the coast side, as well as the services for people who are in long-term skilled nursing facilities. So I'm in favor of the agreement as well, and would be willing to second it when after comments.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Tissier.
I just want to acknowledge a few people that are in the audience there with Seton. One is Dr. Coleman Ryan, and there's Tom Norris, who's on their board, and Jim Moraine, the mayor of San Bruno, who's also on their board. So I just want to recognize you today. And there's many others from Seton, but I'm sure they'll be speaking. So,
Mr. President, I'd just like to publicly commend and thank Mr. Byers and Mr. Niblin. This contract was negotiated over many months. It was complicated, as Supervisor Pine said, and there were lots of roadblocks, and both Verity and John's staff really found creative ways to work around the roadblocks, and I think we really have a good, solid agreement here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maltby. Let me just say one of the things I've appreciated is the updates or briefings that Seton has given us. Mr. Farrelly and Mr. Picelli and the other members of the team were, I think, very good about at least keeping my office informed of progress, and I have appreciated that. So thank you. I guess there are some speaker cards.
Yes, there are.
And so do we want to
Sure.
go to that now?
We have 4 speakers. First is John Farrelly, followed by Coleman Ryan.
Mr. President, Supervisors, my name is John Farrelly. I'm humbled by your comments. Thank you very much. It's always nice to know that the work that we're doing is recognized and rewarded. I also want to compliment Mr. Byers. I think he's done an exceptional job of taking a very complex transaction and simplifying it for the organization. I also think, like Mr. Maltby has said, there's been a lot of give and take in this situation, and the county has shown great willingness to work with us, and we're very appreciative of that. The monies will allow us to make the hospital compliant so that, as you had suggested, we can continue to provide the safety net services that are necessary. It will also allow us to continue to invest in the hospital, new programs, new facility, new equipment, new people, and make Seton what it was in the past. So I thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Coleman Ryan, followed by Jim Ruan.
Good morning, Supervisors, and thank you, Adrian, for helping us out on this. My name is Coleman Ryan. I'm a retired cardiologist as of a year ago. I'm a founding member of the San Francisco Heart and Vascular Institute. I've been a member of Seton Medical Center for 40 years. So that will be next month, it'll be my 40th year. I've been on the board for 28 years. I'm vice chairman of the board since the beginning of the new session. During that time, I went through. We at Seton went through a divorce with Catholic Healthcare West, and we were left standing at the altar twice by prospective buyers. It was not a very pleasant time, and very difficult to rebuild. And with the help of John, I can't say enough about John Ferrelli and Verity and the whole system. We've achieved that, and we've more than achieved that, but we're very grateful for anything you can do to help us, because we're in dire need of seismic upgrades. And I want to compliment everybody who's involved here. And I am very, very proud member of the medical staff and the vice chairman of the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Our next speaker is Jim Ruan, followed by our last speaker, Thomas Nook.
Well, good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. It's great to see all of you again. In addition to being the very proud mayor of the wonderful city of San Bruno, I am also a new governing board member who joined January 2016 along with other community members, including Pat Martell, the city manager of Daly City, Mike Crilly, retired superintendent of Jefferson Union High School District, and Tom Nurse, a local attorney. Seton is the second largest provider of Medi-Cal services in San Mateo County and serves like a safety net hospital for the north part of the county. Since I've joined the board, I've seen firsthand the investment that Verity has made in new equipment, upgrading the hospital, keeping on track with the seismic retrofit requirements. In the last few months, Seton has opened its infusion center and expanded the wound care program. In 2017, Seton is preparing to open its Geros Psych skilled nursing beds and a retail pharmacy. There's a new executive team and new management team revitalizing Seton with hiring initiatives underway right now. So I'm pleased to witness firsthand that Verity is committed to restoring Seton to its former level of reputation. Funding from the county will help tremendously with the seismic retrofit that the hospital must complete by 2020. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Last speaker is Mr. Thomas Nook.
Good morning, Mr. President and members of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Tom Minoris. I'm also a member of the new Board of Directors of Seton Hospital, and I have been a resident of Daly City my whole life. My wife and I have raised our 3 sons there, and the emergency room people know us by first name all these years at Seton. It's been a great hospital for our community. I also just finished 30 years on the board of the trustees of the Jefferson Union High School District, where I once met a younger county council. And I've met so many people in my time in Daly City, families that live there, that use this hospital, and it's a part of their life. It's a part of North County, and it's an integral part of our community, and its service is immeasurable to what happens in the north end of the county. So I'm pleased to hear that the support is there for the hospital. I will be working hard as a community member on the board of directors to see that the things that we've heard today also get done. So I wanted to thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I think that was the last speaker. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. It was moved by Supervisor Tissier and seconded, I think, by Supervisor Horsley.
Yes, you think right.
Okay, and so let's take the vote. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Say
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
And I want to confirm that the motion includes that correction on
It sure
the
does.
resolution. Thank you.
2030 on the last page of the reso.
It sure does. Very good. Thank you all. Now we'll move on to item number 4, which is a study session on the passage of California Proposition 64 on the November ballot and the new medical marijuana legislation. And I believe Mr. Callaghy is going to kick this off.
Good morning, President Slocum, members of the board, Mr. Maltby, Mr. Byers. I'm Mike Callaghy from County Manager's Office, and we'll be kicking off this study session on Proposition 64, known as the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. And what we've assembled here today is really a panel of staff members that have become experts in this area. I commend them. They've gone out, they've received the training, they've talked to their colleagues to really be prepared today to give you as much information as possible about the challenges, the impacts, and the opportunities surrounding this proposition. So the way we have set this study session up today is really an informational session. You'll have the chance to interact with the experts, ask them as many questions as possible, please, and hopefully today we'll leave with an understanding of what the law allows, what it doesn't allow, and some of the impacts surrounding it. Though the law is already in effect, major portions of the law, namely state licensing around cultivation, sales, and manufacturing of marijuana, will not go into effect until January 1st, 2018. So we have time to develop policy here. And though it is really unclear as to what extent exactly the state regulatory process will play, because we don't know if the State Bureau of Marijuana Control will act exactly like the ABC does when it comes to alcohol. That's still being played out. We will keep you apprised of that as it develops. So the good news is about Proposition 64 is local jurisdictions have a lot of control, and we can fashion policies that are specific to our jurisdiction and do what's best for this county. And certainly, that may change from city to city, county to county, but again, we'll have the opportunity to do what's right for this county. And though we don't have any policy decisions before you today, we do have some options that will be presented, and then we are certainly happy to come back as you please with any type of other further work or any direction that you give us at the end. So with that, I'd like to introduce our presenters today. And we'll start with County Counsel Brian Wong and Brian Coolidge. We'll talk in depth about the law. Very complicated, and they are serious experts in this now. And then we'll follow up after that with Fred Crowder to talk about the agriculture aspect of this, and he's of course our agriculture commissioner. Then we'll go to Heather Forshee, Director of Environmental Health, and talk about a lot of the complicated environmental health issues surrounding this. And then on to Steve Monowitz, the Director of Planning and Building, to talk about zoning. And then to Tricia Sanchez, our Undersheriff, to talk about some of the challenges that other law enforcement agencies have faced. And then down to Edith Kabustai, who's our Program Manager in Community Health Promotion Unit, to talk about some of the health implications. And though we don't have a formal presentation by our DA today, Steve Waxaff, he is here to answer any questions surrounding the criminal justice system that you may have. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Brian Wong, our Deputy County Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Calicky. Brian, before you start, we're going to be able to ask questions at the end of each individual's presentation?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, any way you'd like to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Or during the course of, I might suggest.
Or during the course, thank you.
Good morning, President Slocum, members of the board. So between Mr. Coolidge and I, we'll be splitting it up about 50-50, and we'll of course, interrupt us if you have any questions. I'll take those as they come up. So new day dawning. This is a field of marijuana plants under cultivation in the state of Colorado. As you know, Colorado had recent legislation that legalized non-medical or recreational marijuana and allows for commercial development, including cultivation. That will be one of the issues that your board will be considering at some point, and that's one of the things that we'll try to provide you some information on so that you can think about how you may want to proceed. So the County Council's presentation will cover these 4 parts here. I'll be covering the first 2, a brief history of marijuana-related laws, and then an overview of medical marijuana in our state. As you may recall, back in January, there were a number of new laws regarding medical marijuana that came into effect. Mr. Coolidge will cover parts 3 and 4, which include Prop 64, which was on the ballot in November and passed. That relates to non-medical use of marijuana. And then the last part will deal with some of the local legislation options and policy issues that you may want to be thinking about. So as we go through our County Council presentation, we thought we'd highlight 4 areas or issues that you might want to keep in mind as you think about our presentation, but also all the other presentations from the other departments. That includes licensing, so that's sort of the regulatory issues and to what degree the county may allow commercial marijuana activities. Then there's a taxation component. There is an allowance for local entities to tax marijuana activity. Then there's the issue of personal use and how the county may want to deal with outdoor cultivation issues. As some of you may be aware, some of the local cities in our county have already enacted some legislation that deals with parts of Prop 64 that allow for outdoor growing of plants for personal use. The last issue was the coordination and whether the county wants to consider coordinating with the cities within the county on developing policies on these issues. Here's a short timeline. I won't get into too much detail. As you can see, California was the first state to prohibit marijuana back in 1913. Obviously, attitudes have changed over time, starting with the decriminalization of medical marijuana use, and then obviously more recently the decriminalization and allowance for commercial and recreational use. We'll be talking a lot about those 2015 and 2016 items, both the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act and Prop 64. One note is sort of reflective of the changes in attitudes. It has to do with changes in enforcement. Since the decriminalization of possession of less than 1 ounce, arrests have declined substantially. Prop 47 reclassified a number of felonies as misdemeanors. You'll see in the next slide, there's a chart showing the change in arrests with respect to both misdemeanor, especially with respect to misdemeanor marijuana issues. One very important thing to note is the federal non-enforcement at present. So under the United States Controlled Substances Act, marijuana is a Schedule I drug, which means that it has no medical use under federal law. And because federal law governs a lot of these activities, all these activities allowed under state law are still prohibited by federal law. However, under the Obama administration, there's been a relatively hands-off approach. And of course, that policy could shift considerably given the new administration and the appointment of Mr. Sessions as the presumptive Attorney General. So,
can I ask a quick question on that?
Sure.
So technically, the state and the voters have approved legislation that is in conflict with federal law today. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And obviously, I guess we're empowered to do that as a state, but we're at the mercy of whether the federal government would change their positions.
That's right. And so this next slide kind of encapsulates where we are right now under the Obama administration, which is that there's what's called the Cole Memo.
Okay, excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So the Cole Memo kind of lays out how the Obama administration's addressed that issue, which is as long as these 8 priorities that the federal government has established, I'll describe them really briefly in a moment, as long as state law allows those to be kind of respected or followed, then the federal government is not going to take a really active role in trying to enforce kind of federal prohibitions on marijuana. So those 8 categories generally relate to kind of criminal activity and minors. I'll list them out really briefly. The first is preventing distribution to minors. The second is preventing revenue from sales going to gangs and cartels. The third is preventing diversion from states where it is illegal to other states. The fourth is preventing state-authorized activity from being used as a pretext for trafficking of other illegal drugs or activities. The fifth is preventing violence in the cultivation and distribution of marijuana. The sixth is preventing drugged driving and other adverse public health consequences associated with marijuana. The seventh is preventing the growing of marijuana on public lands. And then the eighth is preventing possession on government property or federal government property. And because this is a memorandum, it doesn't have the force of law. It just simply states the policy decision of the current administration. And as I mentioned earlier, that can obviously very quickly change should a new administration decide to go a different direction.
Before you go, Brian, because of the federal prohibition, are there any at risk for persons involved in that kind of business in terms of putting money in a federally licensed or chartered bank?
Yes, there are a number of details related to how you would structure financial transactions that have to take that into account. Obviously, you can't use banks in sort of the normal way an other type of business would be able to.
So the federal government, for example, could seize your funds?
Among other things, yes.
Okay.
And if I could just add one thing, going back to Supervisor Pine's comment, I mean, this Cole Memo can easily be rescinded by the new presumptive Attorney General. It could be rescinded, and right now there's kind of a truce between federal and state government on this issue. But there's a lot of speculation about what might happen under the new administration. We don't know with any certainty what their view on the issue of legalized recreational marijuana is, but this was a lot of speculation. And there is some speculation that one thing the federal government could do under the new administration is sue the state of California to prevent the enforcement of Proposition 64. For example, that's one of the sort of
and they'd have to go to
ideas
Washington and Colorado too, presumably.
Right. So, anyway, it remains to be seen.
So here's a map of current marijuana laws in the United States. The dark green areas are where marijuana is legalized. That includes recreational use. The gray areas are where medical marijuana is legalized. And the states that are highlighted with the red pins indicate places where legislation passed this past November 2016. I'll take a moment now to briefly cover our ordinance here in the county as it relates to medical marijuana. This slide briefly describes it. We allow for collectives, and there's a definition in the Health and Safety Code. It relates to a physical place where medical marijuana can be distributed or otherwise or grown. And our ordinance prohibits sales and profits, advertising, and then establishes exclusion zones around certain things like schools, rec centers, and youth centers. Under our existing ordinance, no license for a collective has ever been issued. The next slide shows you, just for example, what these exclusion zones look like in application in North Fair Oaks. If you look it's a little hard to see, but if you see the striped areas, those show kind of the radius around various facilities that where those are places you cannot have a collective. So that takes us to medical marijuana and the state of the law right now. The Medical Cannabis Safety and Regulation Act was a series of bills that were passed in 2015 and became effective at the beginning of this year. That's AB 266, AB 243, and SB 643. Together, they create a regulatory scheme and licensing for medical marijuana-related activities. At this point, it's important to note that California is going to maintain two separate legal structures for medical versus non-medical. They have not been merged, so depending on the purpose for which you're using marijuana, it will fall under one of those, whether it's the Safety and Regulation Act here or whether it's Prop 64 if it's non-medical. So AB 266 legalizes commercial activity as it relates to medical marijuana. It creates 17 different licenses and allows for-profit businesses to obtain these licenses. It's in contrast to nonprofit cooperatives or collectives or those types of structures. So one of the important things to note here is that, generally speaking, if there is no local licensing for these activities, so if the county were not to locally license these things, there's no availability of the state license. So it's an effectively you can't do it without a local license. And the one sort of exception to that is that delivery can still occur. So if, for example, a license were properly acquired in another jurisdiction, say San Francisco, that product could be delivered within our county unless we expressly banned that delivery. I'll note that only relates to medical marijuana. Mr. Coolidge will talk a little bit about Prop 64. Prop 64 has a different way of treating. Basically, you can't ban the delivery. So there's some inconsistency there between medical versus non-medical. There's some other kind of guidelines here about how the state licenses can only last for 1 year. And there's some rules about cross-licensing, which prevents a single entity from being able to do more than a smaller set of activities. So, for example, you couldn't do every one of the 17 activities. So the second bill is AB 243. That has to do primarily with environmental concerns with respect to cultivation. It requires a local permit. It's meant to address some of the concerns about when you cultivate on land, there are sometimes environmental consequences with the use of water or erosion, those sorts of things. SB 643 relates to regulating doctors and also locations of cultivations and transportation. Like our ordinance, there are some limitations about locations, again, a radius around a particular building or facility. Finally, under SB 643, there are exemptions for patients who actually need to use medical marijuana or their caregivers. And here in these bullet points, you'll see that there's a certain square footage that's allowed for cultivation if you are either a patient or a caregiver. And those it's an amount of area you could cultivate. It's not limited by plant. It's simply a space that you can plant marijuana and then harvest it for your own use or for the use of those that you're caring for. Final point on medical marijuana is that the licensing scheme needs to be fully implemented by January of 2018, and the state has indicated that is not going to be issuing licenses before that. So basically, they're going to hit that deadline right on. They're not going to be doing anything in advance of that. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Coolidge to get into Prop 64.
Thanks. Good morning, President Slocum, members of the board, Mr. Byers, Mr. Maltby. So I'm going to pick it up where we kind of left off on November 8th. So, as Mr. Calvi explained, this past election, the citizens of California voted to approve Proposition 64. It passed with a 57% voter approval statewide, 63% here in San Mateo County. You know, almost 2/3 of our residents were in favor. Some fast facts here. So what Prop 64 does is it legalizes marijuana-related activities. So individuals 21 or over can legally possess, use, sell, transport, process, and cultivate non-medical marijuana. It preserves the existing medical marijuana laws and creates a parallel system for non-medical marijuana, as Mr. Wong explained. The legislature between now and, say, January 1st, 2018 could change that. I've heard that that's kind of perhaps a direction they're going, but as of now, it preserves a parallel system, which is similar to the system that's in place in Colorado. And we'll go through it as we get into the details on Prop 64, some of the distinctions between that system and the new system under Prop 64. Also, the Prop 64 expressly basically has a roadmap where it kind of ticks off the priorities required under the Cole memo. As Mr. Wong explained, and as the board has pointed out, that's subject to change with the new administration. We'll see how that plays out. But at least for the time being, Prop 64 has done what it needs to do to basically attempt to achieve the priorities set forth in the Cole memo. It also, of particular note for us, is that it authorizes county regulation and taxation of commercial activities and allows us to regulate, to a certain degree, personal use. And we'll later on in the presentation kind of get into what exactly that means. All right, so let's get into the weeds a little bit, in more detail, as it were, on Prop 64. It requires a state license for commercial cultivation, manufacturing, testing, retail, or distribution. Like the medical marijuana licensing scheme that Mr. Wong explained, the state must begin issuing licenses by January 1st, 2018. All signs point to the fact that our state is going to wait to the last minute, as it tends to do. It could happen sooner. There's a chance. But all signs are pointing to it waiting until January 1st, 2018. So as Mr. Calgi pointed out at the beginning, we probably have some time. There are actually 19 different licenses that one could acquire under Prop 64. And I'll kind of go through them. There's 13 related to various forms of cultivation: indoor, outdoor, mixed light, size of cultivation space. There's 2 related to manufacturing, and there's 1 each for testing, retail, distribution, and 1 for kind of smaller businesses that have a kind of a small floor plan. Between now and 2022, cultivation sites are limited to less than 22,000 square feet. So they're trying to at least in the beginning, keep it fairly modest in size. After that, you can get the larger cultivation site, which is in excess of 22,000 feet. Other requirements: you have to be a California resident to get a license. and you have to show proof of continuous residency from January 1, 2015 to the date you apply for a license. Although it doesn't expressly prohibit straw man kind of licensing, where someone else kind of gets a license for someone else. But anyway, the intent is that it's only limited for California residents. You can't also be a retailer of alcohol or tobacco. We want to keep those separate. Similar to the medical, your business can't be located within 600 feet of a school, daycare center, or youth center. One interesting distinction between the medical and the commercial is that for commercial or recreational use, school is defined to include kindergarten to high school, and it expressly excludes colleges. So you can be within 600 feet of a college, which is interesting. Also, you can't get a license if you've been convicted of certain violent offenses or offenses related to dishonesty, past drug violations. Also, critically, unlike the medical system where they're trying to prevent cross-licensing and prevent kind of like a vertical integration, there are no limits here. So you can have different, you can be, a retailer and a distributor, a cultivator and a distributor. There's one exception to that. If you get a state testing license, so you're the one who's testing for the potency or the quality of the product, that's the only license you can have. They at least want to keep that separate from the other activities. And like the medical marijuana scheme, you must renew your licenses on an annual basis. Okay, so the local control. You can't get a license if it's prohibited by a local ordinance, including a complete ban on most things. So that's kind of the opposite of what the medical marijuana piece was. There, no action. If we don't authorize it, they can't get a state license. You need a local license to get a state license. Here, if we do nothing, you can bypass the county and get a state license. So effectively, no action by the board could result in allowance within our county. The things we can't ban transportation through our jurisdiction. And you can drive from San Francisco County to Santa Clara County through our county. We can't ban that. We also can't ban delivery. From if there's a licensed delivery service delivering to an adult, we can't ban that. We can regulate it. We just can't prohibit it completely. So I mean, that kind of goes to the local control issues. That go to one of the points that Mr. Wong raised as one of the four kind of consideration points throughout. It's important. The coordination piece, I think, is important here. I think it underscores why we would want to perhaps coordinate with the cities within our jurisdiction, because if one city is more restrictive, it's gonna that's gonna kind of guide how the rest of the county and the other cities go to a certain degree. So I think that underscores the importance of coordinating.
And again, Brian, you're talking about commercial now, as opposed
Talking
to
about
personal
commercial.
use and recreational. You'll talk about that later. So this
I will.
is commercial, right?
Well, John, this is strictly commercial. Also, the state for commercial sales has its own tax scheme. So state and local sales taxes will apply to all sales of marijuana products. Also, beginning January 1, 2018, there's a new excise tax. It's 15% for the sale of marijuana products and $9.25 per ounce for marijuana flowers and $2.75 per ounce for marijuana leaves. This is in addition to existing state and local sales taxes. Medical marijuana is exempt from sales and use taxes, but these new excise taxes would apply to both commercial, non-medical, and medical.
Question for you.
Yes.
Would any of the funding collected by the state be distributed to the counties?
No, not directly. But as we'll get into in a bit, there is authorization for the county to itself impose its own tax. The proceeds and the revenue from that tax will go directly to the county. We can hop a little bit here. There are, it's indirect. It'll go to the state to prevent, past acts of drug enforcement at the local level. it'll kind of feed into the counties that way. But for the most part, no, these taxes exist at the state level, and the state gets to decide how it's allocated. And Prop 64, as we'll talk about in more detail, has a pretty clear explanation of how and where it's going to go.
Okay.
But locally, we have the authority to enact our own tax in addition, and we can say how that goes. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Would that, if we did oppose a local tax, would it be subject to a 218 challenge?
So we have to comply with
Yeah, two-thirds.
So it depends on what the nature of the tax is. If it's a general tax, we just need a 50% majority.
Okay.
If it's a special tax, it would be a 2/3 requirement. So it just depends on what the nature of our tax is.
And could that be applied on, I guess, sales or purchases of marijuana? If we didn't have any commercial or retail in the county, we just obviously personal use can't be prohibited, and other entities from other counties could deliver it by mail or other methods. Is there a taxation opportunity in any of that?
For if it were to be a delivery to a resident in our county?
Yes.
Yeah, so the local it's pretty broad language as to what we can tax. So local jurisdiction can impose its own tax on the privilege of cultivating, manufacturing, producing, processing, preparing, storing, providing, donating, selling, or distributing. It's pretty broad language. So I think under that language, I think perhaps we could have a tax that would apply to distribution to residents within our county. But I think we'd have to look in more detail. But that's kind of my first read of it.
Well, just to point out that it looks like it's going to be pretty heavily taxed without any already with the.
That's true.
The excise tax and a tax on leaves, and then plus our own our own sales tax. So it's going to be pretty heavily.
Yeah, I think we calculated this morning that if the county were to do a max, I think we're allowed 10% excise tax. So if the county were to do that, you're right, Supervisor Horsley. If you take it all together, the sales tax that exists at 9.5 or depending on your jurisdiction, 9 to 9.5, then you add the state, and then you were added the local excise tax, it would be approximately 34.5% tax.
You would probably then be encouraging a black market at it.
Well, interestingly, just for comparison's sake, the effective tax in Denver is I think about 28%. That's Colorado tax plus Denver city tax. In the state of Washington, the effective tax rate is 37%, which is even higher than the numbers that Mr. Byers and I calculated this morning. There has been an issue in Colorado where there's been a rise in black market as a result of kind of the increased taxes. Although, ironically, as Mr. Byers was pointing out to me this morning, one of the policies that Prop 64 attempts or states is going to achieve is to basically ferret out black market marijuana by taxing. It seems almost counterproductive, but yes, Colorado has experienced that same issue where it's been a rise in black market as a result of the taxes.
On the other hand, though, what's our effective tax rate for cigarettes, right?
True, and that probably that's a policy issue. I mean, these are excise taxes, and often excise taxes are intended to perhaps discourage a particular use, or at least to generate revenue to address concerns that are raised by that use. So, tax issues, I want to go back a bit. So here's a quick chart. It's a bit dated, but it's just intended to show that both Washington and Colorado, where legalized commercial use has been around for a while, I mean, they're generating a lot of tax revenue as a result. And I think one study has shown that the state of California anticipates to receive in excess of $1 billion in tax revenue by 2020 as a result of taxing commercial marijuana. We touched upon this briefly. Prop 64 earmarks where the tax revenue is supposed to go. So after reimbursing for cost of regulation and implementing the scheme, $25 million in tax revenue per year is allocated to specific sources, one of which is $3 million annually to the CHP to establish or adopt protocols regarding driving while impaired, which is important. After those specific earmarks have been given their proceeds, 60% goes to basically substance abuse and education prevention programs for youth. 20% goes to environmental programs to clean up damage resulting from illegal cultivation. And then more money goes to the CHP to deal with driving under the influence. We talked about the local tax issue. We can impose our own tax. Again, those are in addition to the state taxes, both sales taxes and the excise tax. And then to Supervisor Pines, or perhaps to Supervisor Horsley's point, the local taxes are subject to the general voter requirements, where it's 50% for a general tax or 2/3 for a special tax. There is a provision in the proposition, which, by the way, is about 63 pages, and so there's probably some things we're not going to cover, but we want to try to summarize it to the extent we can. There is a provision that says that the tax can either be countywide or just in the unincorporated area. So again, that also, I think, leads to potentially coordinating efforts with our local cities. Some recently approved local taxes by counties, they range from 5%. Monterey's is up to 10% for gross retail sales, plus a tax on square footage of cultivation. We touched upon this briefly in Mr. Wong's presentation. There is an issue with this is a cash business because federal banks don't allow you to deposit, process credit cards, deposit checks. Wow. So the retailers operate in cash. It's a money laundering issue potentially. There's some accounting issues. If we are taxing and we want to make sure that what we're taxing is accurate, it's tough to account for that if it's a cash-based business. Other kind of quirky issues involved. So see Al Capone. You have to pay all taxes. You have to pay taxes for all revenue you generate for your marijuana businesses, but you don't get a federal deduction because it's an illegal business federally. Also, you can't declare federal bankruptcy because, again, it's a federal business. So there's just some weird issues that kind of come with it being illegal at the federal level. And yes?
I was just going to say that in today's Chronicle, there's a very interesting article about pot and banking. And one of the things that it says is that California Treasurer John Chang is going to form a group to study the banking issues.
Yeah, it's a serious issue.
Yeah, I recall reading that there is I think one credit union in the state of Oregon that does accept does offer banking for marijuana business. Only one, but notwithstanding, this is a state charter bank, so it's not a federally chartered bank, so it's able to do it. But apparently, it's because of the compliance rules, even to be a state charter bank getting into this business, are so onerous that most state charter banks, are not getting into this area. So,
thanks, John. There's some security issues, as you may gather with operating in a cash-based business. It's a big problem. Prop 64 does require some minimal security measures be put in place by licensees. One, I think, important point to note is that Prop 64 simply sets the baseline requirements. At a local level, we can increase those requirements if we see fit. But there are some baseline security measures that have to be in place to get a license at the state level. Another issue that's I think that's come up in Colorado is the idea of packaging that's directed and misleading. It looks like candy, it looks like Pop-Tarts, and this has been a real issue. Prop 64 does attempt to address this. There are some packaging and labeling requirements. They have to be most of the products have to be in child-resistant packages that are not made attractive to children. So they're trying to get rid of the Mr. Denk bar and the Pop-Tarts issue. Also has to have a government warning on it, similar to what cigarettes have. It has to explain that it may be harmful while pregnant, that it's a controlled substance under federal law, that you shouldn't operate machinery or drive under the influence. Also, it requires that there be a unified potency level. I think it's not to exceed 10 milligrams THC per serving. And the state testing licensees are in place to make sure that it happens. So Prop 64 is attempting to deal with this issue. Also, there's pieces of Prop 64 that deal with sales and advertising. A lot of it is geared toward not advertising to individuals who are under 21, similar to the rules related to alcohol for advertising and marketing. It also, I don't know if Brian touched upon this in his presentation, but the medical component requires a track and trace program. It's meant to, so we can, track where marijuana is delivered, how much, so there's accountability. That same process is also imposed upon commercial transactions as well. There's environmental concerns that have been raised. This is actually depicts an illegal marijuana grow in Northern California. Prop 64 attempts to deal with some of these issues by requiring collaboration of state agencies to make sure that this type of thing doesn't happen with the legal grows. Again, we talked about funding is directed to try to mitigate some of these issues as well. Okay, getting to personal use, that was all commercial use. So to remind you, in addition to the commercial use, effective basically upon the certification of the vote approving Prop 64, individuals over the age of 21 can use, possess, transport, give away to individuals 21 or over up to an ounce of marijuana and up to 8 grams of concentrated marijuana. You can also cultivate up to 6 marijuana plants. The cultivation must occur in a locked area within a private residence, not visible from a public place. That includes a locked yard, as long as it's not visible from a private place. Private residence is defined to mean a house, an apartment, mobile home, or a similar dwelling. It's meant to cover all kind of forms. Just as a visual, this is more than 6 plants, but that would probably be allowed if it were 6 plants. If that's in fact a locked area and it can't be seen from a public place. And one thing I learned kind of going through this is, 6 plants doesn't sound like all that much, but I've been told, kind of researching this, that each plant can yield up to 10 pounds of marijuana, and it can be cultivated up to 6 times a year. And so that's a lot of marijuana for a personal use. And also, to get back to the security issues, if it's $1,500 a pound for marijuana, each person could potentially have $90,000 if it's 6 plants at 10 pounds at $1,500 a pound. So it's a lot of marijuana. So restrictions on personal use.
Can those residents be near schools?
That's a good question. There is nothing that we've read that prohibits anyone from growing, for example, we'll get to this a little bit, indoors in your house, no matter how close you are to a school. So to answer your question, no, we can't prohibit someone. If you happen to live within 600 feet of a school and you're growing it indoors and you have 6 plants, I don't think there's anything we can do at a local level. If it's outdoors, that's something we can regulate. The law allows us to completely ban outdoor cultivation, but we can't ban indoor cultivation, regardless of where it is. So again, just to go on Supervisor Pine's issue, we can place reasonable restrictions on cultivation for personal use, but we can't completely ban cultivation inside a residence. We can ban cultivation outdoors. You can't use marijuana in a public place unless we authorize it. You can't use marijuana where smoking tobacco is prohibited. So we have our own local anti-smoking laws. Those would apply. In fact, our law defines smoke to include marijuana. You can't use within 1,000 feet of a school, daycare center, or youth center, and you can't have an open container or use while in a vehicle. Employment restrictions. A private and public employer can prohibit use in the workplace and use by employees or prospective employees. So that doesn't change under the law. Also, we as a county can prohibit use in county-owned or county-leased buildings. The criminal penalties as a result of Prop 64 have changed a bit. I don't want to go into too much detail on that, but basically, if you're under 18, the infraction, instead of it being a fine, is now you go to counseling. One interesting aspect of a fairly high penalty is if you're a licensee and you fail to keep records, if the state goes and asks you for your records for the past year and you don't have them, the fine can be up to $30,000. That's a pretty big fine at the state level. So just to highlight the differences between medical marijuana and Prop 64, the biggest one I think is medical marijuana. You need a local license to get a state license. So no local license means you can't get a state license. Prop 64 is different. There's no local license required. So silence by the county could mean local authorization. Medical marijuana, the county can ban all activities except for transportation and personal use by patients and caregivers. Prop 64, the county can ban all activities except transportation, delivery, and personal use within a fully enclosed private residence. Medical marijuana, it limits cross-licensing. There's no such limit really under Prop 64. And medical marijuana, the minimum age is 18, and under Prop 64, the minimum age for a license is 21. So there's a gap, obviously, in use for medicinal purposes versus for recreational purposes. So just to kind of touch upon some of the potential policy considerations, what can the board do or not do? They can simply do nothing. They can wait until January 1st, 2018 and see what happens. One consideration with that is there's a potential loss of control. There could be a voter-driven initiative that's put before the board that defines the potential scope of what the law would be. Secondly, the state, as we talked about, actually could kind of get itself together, and it could begin issuing licenses sooner than January 1st, 2018. So that's a consideration. Option two is we could simply adopt an ordinance now. The consideration there, I think, is there's uncertainty. We don't know what the state level licensing and policies and procedures are going to look like. At the federal level, also, with the new administration in place, we don't know how that's going to play out. So I think there's some uncertainty there. And the last option is basically...
Brian, if I can interrupt you, the uncertainty is mostly with regard to the commercial side of the equation as opposed to personal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And the last, or a third potential option is putting a temporary freeze in place in the form of an urgency ordinance that would allow coordination with our cities to kind of fully study the issue. Provides clarity, I think, to our constituents, and it makes clear kind of what's legal currently and what's illegal. But the knock against that potentially is that the state has said that they aren't going to do anything until January 1st, 2018. So, just want to go some, as I think Mr. Wong pointed out, some cities within our county have already taken actions to temporarily ban commercial and outdoor personal use. To date, Burlingame, Foster City, San Bruno, and San Mateo all have temporary bans in place. I think San Carlos considered one and ended up wanting to wait. Also, one of our neighbors to the south, Santa Cruz, actually has a temporary ban that bans commercial and outdoor cultivation. Some counties have attempted to be proactive and have some voter-driven measures that have been put on the ballot in November. Butte County, Inyo County, Yuba County. It passed in Inyo County and didn't pass in Butte and Yuba. And then lastly, we kind of wanted to just list for the board some policy considerations on the activities that are allowed. We don't need to go through this in detail. It's just kind of meant to show kind of a decision tree of the possible issues to consider with each activity. This is, for example, cultivation, where it can happen, from a zoning perspective, where it can happen with regard to schools and things of that nature, environmental considerations, security and storage, how it's authorized, how much a licensed cultivator would have to pay, indoor, outdoor. So with each activity, we tried to go through and list some policy considerations for the board to consider. And I think, this is far from exhaustive, but I think it shows how complicated the issues can be. So unless the board has any questions for me, I'm going to turn it over to Fred Crowder, who's our ag director.
Just one question.
Yes,
We banned smoking in apartment units. Could you smoke marijuana in an apartment unit, or is it banned by the same ordinance?
If our non-smoking ordinance bans smoking in apartments, that would apply also to recreational marijuana. And in fact, our definition of smoke includes marijuana. There is a carve-out, though, an express allowance for medical marijuana. So you can smoke medical marijuana in an apartment.
And going back to local taxes, does the county have authority to oppose a countywide tax or only an unincorporated?
So the Prop 64 says that it could potentially do both. How that works, how that actually practically works out, I think we need to study that in a little more detail. But the law itself expressly states that the local taxation can be either countywide or just in the unincorporated area. So it contemplates both.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fred, thank you. You're up.
Morning, members of the board, County Manager Maltby and Council Byers. I'm Fred Crowder, the County Agricultural Commissioner, and I wanted to compliment Clerk Purewall on his brightening up the room today. Everybody's wearing dark clothes, and I may try to get that jacket for my next presentation. But anyway, this presentation concerns commercial marijuana cultivation, and I hit that button again. And it's going to concern the cultivation as per allowed by Assembly Bill 243 passed last year in California Proposition 64. Council already did a pretty good job of covering these, so I will just move on. Two-tiered system is expended by council. We have to have a local perimeter license in order to get a state license. Of course, as council explained, that changes under Proposition 64. And if the county is silent, then the state may issue a license. As far as wow, that's a hard word to say, commercial cultivation. Three primary species are generally used for cannabis. There's many strains, but they're pretty much a combination of cannabis sativa, cannabis indica, and cannabis ruderalis. These hybridized varieties contain various ingredients, various concentrations of cannabinoids, including tetrahydrocannabinol. I'm glad I was able to say that. And it also includes the cultivation of industrial hemp. That's not a part of Prop 64, but is something that's already on the books. But all of these products at the time of production are tested after harvest, and the concentration of the various cannabinoids follows that product on its label and through the tracking and tracing product all the way through processing and distribution. So the state responsibilities, the California Department of Food and Agriculture is the lead agency for cultivation at the state level. County agricultural commissioners are the local representatives for the Department of Food and Agriculture. And so these are the elements that the state is working on putting together, at least the Department of Food and Agriculture. And those will be elements that my office will be picking up should the county decide to go ahead and allow cultivation. Programmatic EIR is something that the state is really concentrating on, and their intention there is to ensure system integrity and address any potential impacts, especially environmental, that go with outdoor production. Okay, this page got dropped from my presentation here. But the council already covered the licensing that goes with this. They mentioned there's 17 types of licenses. 13 of those are cultivation licenses. Criteria, they described that, location, the size of the operation, and the type of production. And that's something that we'll discuss a little bit more later, is the type of production as far as starts. If you're producing seedlings, they're going to go to another facility that are going to be grown into a finished plant that's harvested. Or if you're going to produce product that goes to finish, bud out, and that's harvested. So largest allowed, some changes have been made on this presently under the Proposition 64 up until, I'm stammering here, up until 2023, these are the criteria that are allowed under cultivation. 22,000 square feet for indoor and mixed light operations. There's no size limit on nursery, production, and there's no size limit on outdoor production. At this time, it's an acre, but on nursery production, there is none. I'll discuss those a little bit more later. County responsibilities. These are the ones we're going to be taking these up. Regardless of if the county doesn't have a program or doesn't allow cultivation, but some cities do. County departments with enforcement authorities throughout the county, such as my own, would be working with cities to ensure track and trace elements and to enforce the Food and Agricultural Code. And so those will be something that we'll be working on down in the future. For my department, these are the programs that we have in place that would dovetail within the cannabis industry. Product is sold over scales. We also enforce product packaging and labeling requirements, statements that are on there. That would include the concentrations. Crop reporting is something that may or may not include cannabis should the county allow cultivation, and it's something that the state is working with at this time. Then the other organic registration and pesticide use enforcement are program elements that could dovetail into commercial cannabis production if it is allowed. Getting a little bit more into considerations if cultivation is allowed. These kind of go to that licensing slide that was earlier. Indoor, outdoor, both. And I didn't include mixed light in there, but that is one of the licensing categories. The license types, discuss that. Type of operations allowed, again, are we talking about nursery stock starts and seedlings, or is it product for harvest? And then the permit requirements, the size of the operation, permit criteria, those are things that council covered as well. Drilling down a little bit more on indoor, outdoor, mixed light operations. Greenhouse is mixed light, I mentioned that earlier, and warehouse is considered indoor. The indoor operations, everything in there is electric. The lighting, the air circulation, temperature controls, and they're very expensive operations. 5 to 6 times, actually 3 to 5 times the level of outdoor grown as far as cost goes. The industry would like to get a little bit more of a greener, and so they've been looking more at greenhouse. These are controlled environments, both of them, and for the mixed light, the greenhouse operations, you get up to 3 crops per year. For a warehouse or an indoor operation, you can look at continuous production. Usually it takes about 60 to 80 days to get a crop, and so those are kind of the parameters. The 22,000 square feet of production is the max that's currently allowed by the state, and that applies to product that is being grown for harvest. It does not apply to, the size limit does not apply to nursery starts. And so there's a question about, how will this impact our industry? Should we allow commercial cultivation here in San Mateo County? How might that influence our industry and the transition of greenhouses or not? And these are some metrics that are taken from our agricultural crop report. And really the bottom line is it comes down to about, if we allowed that 22,000 square feet of cannabis per greenhouse operator in the county, we have 18 greenhouse operators, that'll total about 396,000 square feet of production space, and that is about 9 acres. That totals about 5% of our available greenhouse space. We have over 7 million, almost 9 million, almost 8 million square feet of greenhouse under production right now. So what that means is that actually if we allowed some sort of production here within the county that and we followed the state limits or we put additional criteria on it, that it would have relatively low impacts as far as water use, resource, and really wouldn't be that distinguishable from our existing industry that we have. So outdoor cultivation, you know, our perceptions of outdoor cultivation have been really influenced by the illegal operations that we've seen and the slide earlier that council saw. However, these are unregulated operations that are operating unlawfully, and you know, having permitting and having some sort of licensing and oversight, I don't think that outdoor operations would be significantly different than the existing operations that we have in the county right now as far as outdoor nursery stock type of operations. This one here, this is actually a pot operation up in Humboldt, but this looks like one of our outdoor operations, you know, outdoor nursery operations here. These are shade cloth on the top there with cannabis plants being grown underneath in 5-gallon pots. Eventually, this is a nursery situation. Eventually, these will be spread out and either planted out into the ground. I don't know if this is a nursery operation or one that's going to be going for harvest, but you know, the impacts of these types of operations, you know, we're not necessarily looking at grading lands right up against creek beds, diverting water, and having those types of impacts that we've seen in the illegal operations. In closing, actually, council mentioned for outdoor product, selling homegrown for $1,500 a pound. That's not going to happen. The current price for outdoor is $800 to $1,000, and that's prime product, and 50% of that gets thrown away. And so the types of prices that we see for indoor product is about $2,000 per pound for product that's grown in an indoor operation. Greenhouse goes about $1,800 a pound. If you multiply that out times the 18 locations that we have, if they were to produce 2,200 square feet, 3 crops per year, you're probably looking at, with those values, about $100 million for product that's grown for harvest. And that's about what our current indoor operations are generating and nursery operations. If you were to grow that in a nursery type of situation where you're not growing product for harvest, but you're growing it to be sold to another facility that's licensed to grow it out to bud and to harvest it, you're probably looking at, using those same criteria, about a $40 million industry. However, that's growing 3 times per year, or 3 crops, where I think if you were to go through and you were pretty good about your operation, you might be able to almost produce continuously on the nursery stock. Outdoor cultivation for our community, we're probably using those same criteria. Outdoor is a little harder to estimate the value of it, but we're probably using the same criteria of maybe 20 operations growing about an acre of product. You know, we're probably at the prices that I indicated, $800 to $500, $800 to $1,000 per pound, probably looking at the range of around $10 million. So it's not nearly as profitable outdoor as growing indoor. However, the inputs with the indoor and the labor that goes with it is significantly higher. So in closing, I talked about water use, that the greenhouses, that the indoor use is probably very similar to what we already have. Environmental impacts, talked about that. The right to farm in the Williamson Act, you know, there's some questions about those right now, and presently agencies at both the state level and my office are taking a look at, you know, assessing the implications of the Medical Cannabis Act and how that's going to influence, you know, whether cannabis is going to be a right to farm product or a Williamson Act commodity. And that's something that we're going to sort out down the road. I mentioned earlier about cities in San Mateo County, if their decisions regarding cultivation. You know, my county and some other departments, my department, some other departments have countywide authorities and responsibilities. And so if some cities decide to go ahead and allow cultivation, then my office would be, you know, testing those scales and engaging them at the level that we have programs that enforce. So thank you for your time and attention. This is a picture that was sent me by the commissioner up in Humboldt. Apparently with the legalization, everybody is getting into growing cannabis up there. I'm glad to take any questions that you might have at this time, though.
Questions for Mr. Crowder? Thank you for the presentation.
And next up is going to be Heather Forshey from Department of Environmental Health.
Actually, that's not quite true, because we're going to take a break.
Oh.
So we'll take what do you say, 10 minutes? Thank you.
What is it?
Ready? Okay, I believe we are ready to resume. And as I recall, it was Heather Forshey up next.
Mr. Maltby, Mr. Byers, Heather Forshey, Director of Environmental Health Services. My piece will focus on manufacturing and sales. Oh, 1 second. All right, so following the cultivation described by Mr. Crowder, manufacturing is often the next step whereby the remains of the raw plant, minus the buds usually, are transformed into other products such as honey, oil, butter, or edibles. The photos at the top of the slide depict different consistencies of marijuana concentrates made from the plant's resin, which are consumed in this form by smoking or vaping or processed further into products such as edibles. The reason manufacturing takes place is to concentrate the cannabinoids found in the resin of the marijuana plant. Cannabinoids are the over 100 chemical compounds found in the plant's resin. Examples of cannabinoids include the more well-known tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, known for its psychoactive effects, and cannabidiol, or CBD, the cannabinoid often attributed to treatment for seizures. Over the years, there's been an upward trend in the comparative levels of THC in marijuana plants. In the study published by the Journal of Forensic Sciences, the average concentration of THC in the resin of a plant in 1981 was 1.25%. By 2011, the concentration had increased to approximately 11%. Today's extracts may contain anywhere from 20 to 95% THC by weight in the resin due to the process of concentrating the cannabinoids in the resin. For many years, people have concentrated the extracts from the marijuana plant. More recently, the systems to produce more concentrated extracts have come onto the market. These are just a few examples of manufacturing or extraction processes to provide the board with an overview. There are numerous processes, some safer and with fewer issues, and some that are much more extensive. These are two examples of extraction systems that have been permitted in other states for commercial extraction of marijuana constituents. To give you a quick summary of the process, parts of the marijuana plant are placed into the metal cylinders that you see on the screen. In the example on the left, carbon dioxide is fed through the top and extracts the resin off of the marijuana plant, and the resin flows to the bottom of the cylinder where it's collected. Simpler systems on the right go through a very similar process, but different solvents such as butane, propane, or ethyl alcohol can be used to extract the resin. Although these systems are designed to capture and reuse extraction chemicals, there are still risks associated with their use. Leaked carbon dioxide can displace oxygen in a room, making it impossible to breathe. And the use of solvents presents a significant flammability and explosion hazard. The manufacturing process will also concentrate molds and pesticides, if those are present in the plant, into the end product. To the left, you'll see the extracted plant resin coming from one of the extraction methods described in the previous slides. From here, the resin's further processed to create the various forms or consistencies depending on the next step in the manufacturing process. Heat is one method used to eliminate the remaining solvent from the solvent extraction process, as well as mixing the resin with oil, which will adjust the consistency of the extract for further processing. Problems do arise when you have unregulated extraction methods, as seen in the image. Here we have someone who's placed the plant material inside of a PVC pipe. There's a screen on one end and a can of butane on the other. The solvent's fed through the pipe and strips the resin from the plant material, depositing it into a glass dish, which is sitting on top of an electric skillet. The skillet's used to heat up the resin to remove any remaining solvent. This type of processing is problematic because of the serious flammability hazard posed by releasing the butane solvent into the atmosphere. Law enforcement and fire departments often find these extraction setups in residences. The slide above is self-explanatory. In 2014, Colorado had 32 such explosions due to solvent extraction processes, as described previously. In that same year, UC Davis's medical center saw 33 cases of burns or other serious injuries due to solvent extraction. In 2014, California's Department of Toxic Substances Control, their emergency response unit responded to 50 reports of hash oil labs, along with 18 separate reports of abandoned butane canister stockpiles. Major burn treatment centers at 2 hospitals in Northern California reported in 2015 that nearly 10% of severe burn cases were attributed to butane hash oil explosions, which was more than burn cases from car accidents and house fires combined. From extraction of the resin, the concentrated form is often incorporated into edible products. It's likely that the state will require manufacturing of edibles be done in kitchens constructed to commercial food preparation standards, as you see in the top left image. These images are just one example of infusing cannabinoids into edibles. At the bottom left, you'll see that the concentrate is mixed in with the butter, which will then be incorporated into the cooking process to produce the edible. The state has indicated it will set detailed regulations around the serving sizes, packaging requirements, and the types of edibles that can be manufactured and sold in California. As County Council indicated, commercial sales of marijuana and marijuana-infused products will be legal under Prop 64. Sales will be allowed within stores, and delivery of products sold by the stores will be legal. The state's developing minimum regulations, and local jurisdictions, as County Council mentioned, will have the ability to develop additional conditions or restrictions. Minimum age for sales is 18 if you qualify for medical marijuana status, and 21 for commercial recreational sales. The state's currently determining what will be allowed and what will not be allowed for sale in dispensaries, but whole product, edibles, and equipment will likely be allowed at a minimum. Dispensaries in other locations and co-ops often sell various forms of their product, as the images depict. These images are examples of various products derived from the marijuana plant, including the whole buds, e-cigarette cartridges, and waxes. Edibles ranging from cookies to drinks to frozen desserts to pasta sauces and everything in between are being manufactured for sale in dispensaries in other states that have already legalized recreational marijuana sales. THC concentration has varied by product, along with the serving size. There is not a consistent approach state to state on packaging or even the products permitted for sale. For example, on concentration, Colorado allows 10 milligrams per serving of THC, while Oregon allows 5 milligrams per serving of THC and has a separate set of standards for concentration for medical marijuana sales. In Colorado dispensaries, edible sales comprised approximately 45% of dispensary revenue in 2015. So many state agencies will be playing a major role in cannabis regulation. A newly established Bureau of Medical Cannabis Regulation sits under the Department of Consumer Affairs. Department of Food and Agriculture will oversee, as Mr. Crowder indicated, all cultivation and track and trace of all plants from seed to sale. The Department of Public Health will be in charge of manufacturing oversight. The state will be issuing licenses for manufacturing, and that includes edibles manufacturing. They will be performing some type of inspection. They'll be standing up an inspection program for manufacturing facilities statewide. They'll be developing equipment standards for manufacturing, laboratory standards for testing the product, and they'll be coming up with labeling and packaging requirements. Department of Consumer Affairs, the Bureau of Medical Cannabis Regulation, will oversee product testing and results review and conduct enforcement against industry. Department of Consumer Affairs will also oversee the distribution of the various forms of the product from one process to another. And they will be licensing dispensaries, and they will be setting up some type of inspection program for dispensaries at the state level. State agencies have not released draft regulations yet. We're hoping that we will see first drafts will be released in early 2017. But they have emphasized that they're developing minimum standards, which local jurisdictions can build upon via ordinance. So if any of the commercial activities are allowed locally, local permitting and inspection programs would include building and planning department, fire, ag, and environmental health services. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Steve Monowitz, our Community Development Director. There he is.
Well, thank you for the presentation. Questions or comments? Excuse me. Nope. Okay. Yes, Supervisor Broom.
Do the products have to be sold in a dispensary, or could they just be on the shelves of grocery stores?
The state is working out the details. They have indicated that there will be limitations as to where the products can be sold.
Thank you.
Good morning, President Slocum, members of the board, Mr. Maltby and Mr. Byers. I'm Steve Monowitz. I'm the Director of the Planning and Building Department. Marijuana legislation poses some interesting questions for the Planning and Building Department as it relates to how the county may want to supplement the state regulations that are coming about. Some of the questions that we're grappling with is, from a land use perspective, should cultivation, processing facilities, and retail sales be allowed land use, and if so, where? From a zoning perspective, we are asking ourselves how we should supplement our existing zoning regulations to deal with the impacts of such businesses. And from a building regulation standpoint, we are wondering what regulations will be needed to ensure that any allowed cultivation, processing, and sales protect the public's health and safety. So with regard to cultivation, and I'll go through this with regard to cultivation, processing, and sales, there's really two issues. How do our existing regulations apply, and what might we do in the future? With regard to cultivation, we prohibit broadly commercial uses within residential districts. So I think commercial growing and sales is not something that can take place in residential areas, and that's not something we'd recommend we change. However, in our rural areas, from a land use and zoning perspective, we have not traditionally told farmers what crops they can and cannot grow. And so to the degree the county may want to regulate the location and type of cultivation activities, I would suggest that we really look at that from a health and safety perspective, because when we look at it from a land use and zoning issue, it potentially could result in lengthy and controversial debate in terms of what the content of those land use regulations should be and require the certification of the State Coastal Commission, whereas if we address these rules from a health and safety standpoint, we can avoid those long deliberations. And then with regard to industrial districts, our current regulations could be interpreted to allow indoor cultivation within those areas. And we will need to decide whether or not we want to supplement our zoning and building regulations to ensure that where cultivation is allowed, it's conducted in a safe manner that's compatible with the surrounding land uses. Okay, moving on to production. in our planned agricultural district, you are allowed to process, store, package, and ship agricultural products. So currently our planned agricultural district regulations are pretty broad in terms of the storing, packaging, and shipping of a crop. And that's something that the board may want to change should it allow for the sales and production of marijuana products. Also, in our industrial districts, you can manufacture, process, and store products. Now, although we do not specifically call out marijuana products, the existing regulations could be interpreted as allowing the production of marijuana products in our industrial area because those districts allow similar uses that are equivalent to and compatible with the other types of uses that occur in that district. So with regard to possible future regulations, we may want to consider amending use permit requirements, establishing density limits, and incorporating performance standards into our zoning if we are going to allow the manufacturing or processing of marijuana products in specified areas. Similarly, we will want to look at building regulations to include mandatory odor controls, safety equipments, and routine inspection schedules. Finally, with regard to sales, currently our zoning allows retail stores and business and markets within commercial and industrial districts. And just like with regard to processing, although we don't specifically call out the sale of marijuana products, our commercial industrial districts allow broad retail uses and could be interpreted as allowing for the sale of marijuana. So with regard to future regulations, again, we will want to consider supplementing our regulations to address the impacts of the sales facilities. For example, to address use permit requirements, sign limitations, parking requirements, how dense of facilities we might allow in certain districts, and also their proximity to schools, parks, and other sensitive receptors. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Monowitz. Questions?
Seeing none, next up we have Tricia Sanchez under
Mr.
Sarah.
Slocum, if I could ask a question that wasn't covered, maybe County Council might want to address this too. Mr. Byers and I were just talking about it. While you cannot regulate the growing of marijuana for personal use within a home, is it possible that somebody could process it for personal use within a home? And if so, is that something we might want to prohibit because of the danger of a fire hazard?
Good morning, everyone. David Soldman from the County Council's office. So part of your question is super easy, which is could we prohibit it? Absolutely we could. Could they do it? As far as whether the zoning allows it, I suspect the answer is no. So it probably would not be allowed under the zoning. They also, of course, would need a license. If we're not issuing the license, they couldn't do it for medical. Theoretically, they could do it for non-medical. But again, if the zoning doesn't allow it, it can't be done.
Okay, I'm here to talk about the impacts with the passage of Proposition 64 on the Sheriff's Office. And we, along with the County Narcotics Task Force and the entire team put together, I do want to thank Mike Callaghy. They've been working very hard on this the last year. Have talked about some of the impacts and what we've seen in other jurisdictions, such as in Colorado, that we might face here. Every year as the law changes, of course, we respond to serve the communities in that fashion through knowledge, training, and preparedness that can keep us ready to respond to those regulatory changes. So, what have others encountered during the 3-year study by Colorado State Police? Marijuana DUI cases increased by 41%. Marijuana and alcohol-related DUI cases was up by 77%. During the same period, there was more minor students that were involved in the selling, storing, and consuming of all forms of marijuana on school campuses. So obviously that will be a challenge with outreach and working with our youth in the communities that we serve and the school officials. One of the things that was touched on, so I'm not going to go into too much, but is the honey oil that can be extracted through some of the labs and discussions that was talked about, 8 times more powerful than regular marijuana. And DEA saw 167% increase in labs in Colorado, and illegal labs can obviously be very dangerous. This next slide you see on the top left quadrant and the bottom right, that was from a honey oil lab in the city of Foster City. And then the other 2 are Anaheim on the top right and Walnut Creek on the bottom left, where you can see, of course, how dangerous it is for, at this point, doing the illegal honey lab processing and the dangers to public safety and first responders and the entire community there. So that's something that, of course, we need to address and respond in accordingly with training, proper training and response for our first responders. So internal training, obviously with all the changes in the law, policy, new ordinances, responding to fires, DUIs, and marijuana grow, we're going to try and identify and obviously have proper training involved. There is an understanding of the type of licensing required in the agricultural type businesses, so that's something that we'll continue to work with our county stakeholders to address. We'll need to increase the number of staff for us on our drug recognition experts. We've worked collaboratively with the district attorney's office, very helpful in interpreting the laws and how local law enforcement should be responding, and then also with our forensic laboratory on how we deal with the identification and processing of such events that we might come in contact with. And the challenges, such as for our forensic laboratory, workload increase. Obviously, we'll probably have a lot of cases that impacts that on blood urine testing required for marijuana. Processing and storage of lab equipment that might be seized because we don't think illegal cultivation or honey oil labs is going to stop with the passage of this, so we need to have the readiness to be able to respond to that. And then also business licensing inspections, if we collaborate in that fashion, what and how are we going to do that? And one thing to note on a typical lab, it can require 3 to 4 people just for separate cleanup, and as many as 20 people. So if you have an illegal lab explosion, you can imagine what happens in the neighborhood and then the resources that are involved to be able to respond and mitigate that situation. So that's just talking briefly about the challenges that we expect, but we're obviously at the Sheriff's Office and local law enforcement and public safety. We will be responding to the passage and whatever our jurisdiction and the Board of Supervisors does on any type of regulations. Is there any questions I can answer for anyone?
Thank you. Supervisor Groom.
Thanks, Sheriff. Earlier in the presentation, we were told that some of the funds that will come from this will go to the CHP to start deciding or to start figuring out what constitutes driving under the influence. What will you do in the interim?
Right now, it's very challenging, and the funding disbursement, we'll have to see how that works out. But for us right now, it's even challenging currently. I know our forensic laboratory, they're all reaching out because if we have someone driving under the influence, the current testing for marijuana, it could be in your system for up to 10 days. So it's a very challenge currently and moving forward because that might rise, is there is no specific test, correct me if I'm wrong, our lab director's nodding in the affirmative, there's no specific test to say if I'm driving under the influence of marijuana right now. We have other things that the law enforcement officer will observe your driving habits, how you're able to, what's your intoxication level. So, arrests can be made and blood tests can be taken, but it is just challenging. So we're hoping moving forward that in the scientific community, they will identify a test that will make it readily easier to be able to prove that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just a couple questions before you go.
Sure.
One of the things that concerns me is the number of DUI cases that have gone up, and especially because if you don't have a testing device, more of them are going to challenge. So we're going to end up with more court cases, I assume. And the other thing that concerns me is the number of students that are referred to law enforcement up by 45%. I guess that's in Colorado. So I assume that means that more younger people are using marijuana.
That's the potential. Not only, I mean, obviously, college campuses or minors. This I don't have the details if it's that broken down between what the age groups are, but just in general. So we would expect, with any passage of something like this, there's going to be the curiosity. So the preventative identification and awareness training for parents, school officials, and children is going to be, something that we're going to take very seriously and implement.
I don't know if you can answer this, but one of the things that this was kind of sold based on the idea that somehow it was going to have an impact on the illegal market. Has that been the case in other states like Washington or Colorado? Has it had an impact on the illegal importation of marijuana or not? Or do we know?
I think it's still early to tell. I don't think it is resolved. In some cases, as we heard earlier, it could potentially increase it, for the black market, especially on the funding side of it and the complications there. So I think for us, we'll have to see what happens in California. But the likelihood goes to say that it probably would, because it's not going to eliminate the illegal market. So,
thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Tissier.
Just a quick question. Under the business license inspections, would that come from the sheriff's department, or would that come from the health department, or environmental health, or both?
probably be environmental health in the health department, but many times if it happens in our jurisdiction, we might be present if they're going to be doing an inspection or if there's any action. A lot of times through collaboration, we partake together in some of those efforts. So if it happens in sheriff's office jurisdiction.
If I could add, I mean, if we wanted to use the model that we used for the existing ordinance, it's actually a partnership between the sheriff's office, the planning division, and the environmental health division, and each one of them has responsibilities. So it really depends on what the board decides to do, if anything, with respect to regulation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Pine?
No questions.
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, and I'd like to introduce from the Health Services, Edith Kabuslai.
Good morning, President Slocum, members of the board, Mr. Byers and Mr. Maltby. I'm Edith Kabuslai, and this morning I'll be presenting to you the public health and behavioral health impacts of marijuana use. County Council already brought up earlier that marijuana is considered by the federal government to be a substance as a Schedule I substance. And what this means is that there currently is no acceptable medical use for marijuana. There is a high potential for abuse and also high risk for addiction. Secondly, teens who use marijuana are more likely to experience negative impacts such as getting lower grades and dropping out of high school. Additionally, long terms of marijuana use experience lower IQs, lower life satisfaction, memory and relationship problems, and poor mental and physical health. In addition, tobacco prevention advocates have expressed concerns about the potential impact of increased marijuana use in San Mateo County on the smoke-free norms that we have spent over 25 years in building in San Mateo County and in California. This slide shows you the higher brain functions that are impacted by marijuana. On the left-hand side, you see the brain functions that are impaired or reduced by marijuana, and those include learning, attention span, judgment, problem solving, perception of facts and time, emotional and behavior control, as well as motor coordination, and that includes driving. On the right-hand side, you see the brain functions that are increased by marijuana, and those include impulsivity, appetite, anxiety, suspiciousness, and euphoria. Marijuana is also involved in many emergency room visits throughout the United States. In 2009, there were more ER visits due to marijuana than heroin, amphetamine, and meth combined. In 2010, there were over 461 emergency room visits due to marijuana, and that's an 84,000 increase from 2009. Marijuana use is the cause of more ER visits for people under 21. And just as a reminder, people under 21 do not have access to marijuana in the U.S. And also there's research that shows that there's an increase in the number of people with cannabis hyperemesis syndrome with long-term marijuana use. As many of you know, marijuana has been recommended for people who might be undergoing chemotherapy or suffering from AIDS. And the research is actually showing that with long-term use of marijuana, nausea and vomiting are some of the results. Next up, we want to talk about the behavioral implications of marijuana use, and this is, again, U.S. data. Data is showing that 17% of people who start using marijuana during their teens become addicted, and that percentage goes up to 30 to 50% if the teen is a daily user of marijuana. In 2013, there were over 4 million people throughout the United States, 12 years old and older, who have a marijuana abuse or addiction problem. Also, marijuana can worsen psychotic symptoms for people with schizophrenia and has been linked to depression, anxiety, and a loss of drive or motivation. This next set of tables show the mental health impact on people with history of marijuana use, those would be the ones in blue, versus people with no history of use, the ones in red. And what this table, trying to get the button to use, doesn't work. The table on the upper left show you is that people who are marijuana users are more likely to become hospitalized. On the bottom left, they are more likely to be hospitalized against their will. And then on the upper right, they're more likely to stay in the hospital longer than people with no history of marijuana use. Then we wanted to share with you some lessons that Colorado has learned since they have legalized non-medical marijuana. And this would be data for people 12 to 17 years old. And the 3 bars show you the increase in marijuana use between 3 time spans in Colorado. Before they commercialized medical marijuana, there was a 20% increase when they did commercialize medical marijuana in the middle, and then when recreational marijuana was legalized, an additional 20% increase. Also, we took a look at Colorado sharing their data related to schools and all drug violations in schools. This is for the school year 2015-2016. And what this shows you is that marijuana is involved in 58% of expulsions in the schools, 73% of referrals to law enforcement, and 63% of suspensions. And this next slide will show you what the predominant reasons were for those violations. And primarily they were for students in possession of marijuana, as well as students under the influence of marijuana during school hours. Here in San Mateo County during this summer 2016, we conducted a knowledge, attitude, and behavior survey related to marijuana. The surveys were collected between June and August of this year. There were over 4,000 respondents to the survey, and we collected them through paper, pencil, as well as social media outreach that were conducted by our community partners. There were several cities you see listed there from which we were able to collect at least 300 surveys. And for those cities, we were able to conduct specific analyses for those jurisdictions, and we have community partners from each of those jurisdictions other than Burlingame, and they can speak with you and provide that data for you if you are a representative from those cities. And if you are from Burlingame, we are happy in the health department to have a conversation with you about that. So we wanted to share with you what the data tells us at the countywide level. We asked people how they felt about adults and youth using marijuana, and what you see on the left is related to adult use. About 27% of people were very concerned about adults using marijuana in San Mateo County, with an additional 25% being at least a little bit concerned. Those numbers jump on the right when we asked them how concerned they were about youth using marijuana, and we see that 54% of people are very concerned about youth using marijuana, with an additional 33% being at least a little bit concerned. We also asked people when the last time was that they used marijuana, and what this shows you on the upper right there is a 20% marijuana use rate in San Mateo County. You add up the 14 for the ones who used within the last week and the additional 6 that used within the last month. The definition of current user is someone who has used within the last 30 days. And if we take a look at a 20% use rate in San Mateo County, estimating that there are about 600,000 people who are adults in San Mateo County, that's 120,000 people who are current users of San Mateo of marijuana in San Mateo County. We also asked people, because this was done before November, if they would use marijuana if it was available legally, recreationally. And 31% of people responded yes, they would use marijuana if it was legal. And if we apply the same math, applying the 31% to 600,000 adults in San Mateo County, we're looking at over 180,000 people in San Mateo County who would be potentially marijuana users. And if we apply the 17% addiction rate to that, there'd be over 30,000 people in San Mateo County who could potentially be addicted to marijuana and may potentially need treatment programs within our county. Additionally, we asked people how they felt about specific policy options if marijuana were to become legal. 68% of the respondents support having retail licensing laws for marijuana. 67% support marijuana retailers to be located at least 1,000 feet from youth-sensitive areas. Prop 64 currently states 600 feet. The definition of youth-sensitive areas on the survey mentions schools, parks, and such. 50% of the respondents disapprove of marijuana stores opening in their neighborhood, and 61% of people disapprove of people using marijuana in public places. Additional concerns that we wanted to bring to your attention in the area of prevention. The state initiative does not address adequately the need for prevention and early intervention adequately. As mentioned by council earlier, there are no details around how the monies will be distributed and how the monies are to be used across California. In the area of surveillance, we need to identify surveillance systems for tracking the impact of marijuana, especially as related to edibles. In the area of research, we need to understand the short and long-term effects of legalization, especially on our use. What we have currently done in San Mateo County, I mentioned the survey that we conducted over the summer. We've also provided our community leaders with a 5-part training series related to marijuana. We've conducted community strategic planning processes in the months of September and October, and are currently in the process of conducting additional focus groups in the community. And we have staff from the health department who are involved in the statewide efforts. One ahead. What we learned from our community strategic planning process is that our community is wanting a countywide effort to coordinate prevention efforts across San Mateo County, very similar to the Tobacco Education Coalition structure. And also within the health department, we have staff who are participating in the state's non-medical marijuana surveillance work group. With that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for the presentation. Questions?
No, it's just pretty sobering, though. Wow.
I actually had a question, if you could. Some of the data, and especially I'm talking about the impacts on young people, kids, students, were those studies, like, is there a difference between heavy use or regular use with kids, and then kids that, from time to time smoke a joint? For instance, the statistics that you cited, were they all based on what type of usage, I guess is the question.
Well, the data related to addiction rates with a 17% for marijuana users, that increased to 30 to 50% for daily users, so that there's differentiation. There just isn't enough research across all the different variations that you mentioned, because marijuana has been a Schedule I substance and illegal, so not a whole lot of research has been conducted, and the research that has been conducted has to be very controlled and therefore very limited. So that's an area of research that we need to have a better handle on.
Okay, thank you.
One more question.
Questions?
I was always of the understanding that marijuana was not addictive, but I guess I must be wrong about that. Is it similar to like cigarettes, with like when people are addicted to, have a craving for nicotine, or what does addiction mean in this context?
Well, the patterns of addiction are very similar between substances like tobacco and marijuana. And I think that one of the things that we learned also in the survey that I didn't get a chance to cover because we have 10 minutes was the fact that there's a lot of information out in the community related to marijuana, where our community has a very different understanding of marijuana's impacts on the person and on the community than what we know from the limited research that has been made available to us. So there's definitely a lot of different information that is out there. And that's part of the reason why our partnerships wanted to prioritize a community education campaign moving forward, so that as we consider what should be happening in the communities, we first change the perception that we have about marijuana and its impacts in the community.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Callaghy with some additional comments.
Thank you very much, members of the board. So that's the end of our formal presentation. We're certainly willing to answer any more questions you may have. I believe there might be some public comment. And then I'll just, after public comment, have a few closing remarks.
Thank you.
Sure.
Our first speaker is Martin Fox, followed by Peter Vanos.
Yeah. Item 6.
Good morning again, President Slocum, members of the board, my fellow veteran, Mr. Maltby, and County Council, Mr. Byers. And thank you again for your service to the county. Please prepare for the unintended consequences of the Good Intention Paving Company's legalization of what is euphemistically called recreational marijuana use by planning for the public health crisis and the public safety crisis related to the sufferings and deaths that are likely to result. After Colorado legalized marijuana use by adults in 2012, the Mexican drug cartels experienced a 40% drop in marijuana sales. They turned to producing a purified form of heroin more cheaply than their East Asian producers. The more potent and cheaper heroin caught pill users and even heroin addicts by surprise, and overdose deaths skyrocketed, more than doubling from 2000 to 2014. More than 47,000 people died from drug overdoses in 2014 than any other year in American history. That's 125 people a day, more than 5 lives every hour, a fatality level that matched the AIDS epidemic's peak in 1995. If California's recreational marijuana use experiences anything even close to Colorado's, there will be a record number of deaths resulting from opium and opium-like drugs, including morphine, OxyContin, and heroin. These deaths will create both a public health crisis and a public safety crisis that the Good Intentions Paving Company has chosen to ignore. Please compile a database of the public health and public safety costs related to the passage of Prop 64 so the Good Intentions Paving Company can be thoroughly discredited, and we have evidence needed to persuade the voters to repeal Prop 64. Thank you.
We have 5 more speakers. Second one is Peter Vanos, followed by Brent Turner.
Hi, my name is Peter Vanos. I have a greenhouse operation in Pescadero. I grow cut flowers with my dad. We've been doing this for 50 years. The cut flower business has suffered greatly over the last, 10 years in particular. And a lot of us growers have gone out of business and sold, moved on. Those of us who are still in there, we're barely hanging on. We're looking for a way to continue to stay in agriculture. I think this may be a chance for us to stay in agriculture if we can learn to grow this. And this isn't anything I thought I would be doing, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I never thought I'd be up here saying I'm interested in this, but here I am. I'm trying to stay alive and stay in farming. So please keep that in mind as you consider your policies for all of us in the cut flower industry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Brent Turner, followed by Calix Nelson.
Hello, groovy supervisors. It's good to see you again this afternoon. And I just wanted to, I saw this on the agenda, so since I was here, I thought I'd stick around. I wanted to applaud the county for putting together this study. I think I want to associate myself with the person that spoke in front of me to say, this certainly does provide good opportunity for coastside growing businesses. It obviously, the information that has come out shows the medicinal qualities of this particular drug. I understand you're likely to get pushback from Big Pharma on this. As to Mr. Fox's statement that this will result in an epidemic of overdoses with heroin users, I would think we should probably take a look at the Big Pharma issue there with pharmaceuticals, Oxycontin and so forth being obtained, and we're in crisis on that issue right now. So I don't know if there is a path from talking about cannabis to overdosing on heroin. But I do think that the taxes to be obtained here can be properly plowed into education, and that we should be teaching our kids the benefits of sobriety. I don't drink or smoke, but I do advocate for leniency and forward thinking here, because I think it is fairly innocuous. Kids that are going to smoke a joint are going to do that anyway. I don't believe that the black market is going to be increased. I think if you want to find cannabis, you can do so. If we legalize it, we'll keep kids out of jail. We should educate them about sobriety. But the tax ability here for the county is so strong, we could take that money, put it toward education, and thank you for your time.
Next speaker is Kelly X. Nelson, followed by Shasha Henkin.
This is from somebody else, too. Good afternoon, President Slocum, Board of Supervisors, Mr. Maltby, Mr. Byers. My name is Kellex Nelson. I'm with the Resource Conservation District, or RCD. We are a special district in San Mateo County that was formed by farmers in 1938, and we serve as boots on the ground to help landowners, farmers, jurisdictions, and others best manage their natural resources. Our 4 program areas are water, wildlife, climate, and agriculture. The RCD does not take a position on whether or not cannabis should be produced in San Mateo County, but want to make sure that you're aware of the services that we can provide as you move forward with policy. There are established best management practices, or BMPs, for cannabis cultivation, with a proven track record of protecting water, soil, land values, sensitive habitats, and endangered species. Some BMPs are frequently required by regulation and incorporated in policy making, and there are also countless opportunities for voluntary adoption of best management practices for resource stewardship. These BMPs can help protect property values and increase agricultural production. They can be implemented on outdoor grows as well as indoors and in greenhouses. Right now, RCDs around the state are ramping up in our ability to provide technical assistance on this issue. And so our assistance to you, to county staff, to landowners, and to growers can take many forms. And I'm happy to talk with you or county staff about that further. Just wanted to remind you that we're here and able to help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next one is Shasha Henkin, followed by Athila Lambino.
Hi, thanks for your time. My talk kind of went away with this discussion because there's been a lot of, I feel, unjustifiable things that have been said. Number one, I feel a lot of these comments are post-legalization comments, because we are living with legalization now. And so some of these issues as to do with public health and all these things are things that you should be addressing, but as the fact that it exists currently. And I wanted to emphasize one thing that the Agricultural Commissioner said, which is that 5% of our greenhouse space in San Mateo County could produce the same amount of money as all of the greenhouse production that is currently being done in this county. More than double our production, our economic production, with 5% of our space. There is nothing in agriculture that exists like this. There is not anything that exists like this. I live in rural San Mateo County, in your district, and we, as our farmers here have explained, we have a crisis in housing. We have a crisis with jobs. We do not have any, we cannot really provide, with the we do not have enough money being produced in San Mateo County in the rural areas to justify living there. You know, the only people who move to rural San Mateo County now are people with enough money to purchase a piece of land from people who have had it in their family for years. There are people who really would be able to benefit from this, and in a way that is unprecedented. Like, I want to say that again, 5% of the existing greenhouses could accommodate the same amount of all of the greenhouse production. If I could just say one other thing, the reason we have this many greenhouses in San Mateo County is because it is the best place in California to have greenhouses. We do not have to spend money to heat them. We do not have to spend money to cool them. The reason this cut flower industry exists is because we are the leader in flower production. And if we are to not allow that to happen, greenhouses will be put in the Central Valley, where the heating costs and the cooling costs are going to be much more, where the water resources are going to be much more effective, and you're going to push this opportunity for our local farmers to take part in this revolution. I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Athila Lambino, followed by our last speaker, James Ray.
Hi, Board of Supervisors. My name is Attila Lambino. I am the project coordinator for the North County Prevention Partnership. We are a substance abuse prevention coalition focusing on youth, and we serve the cities of Daly City, Pacifica, and South San Francisco. The county provided an excellent context setting the stage for this, and I just wanted to touch on a few other points that I think are important in the work that we've done. Considering that we can't really do much about the transportation of marijuana, I wanted to urge the council to consider delivery services, potentially things like Uber Eats or Grubhub that may deliver marijuana to people at home, potentially limiting the minimum age or limiting delivery hours, maybe setting the minimum age of drivers to 21. And what can we do about minors that may use their older brother or parent's account to order marijuana when they may not be at home? Another thing that I heard about in doing some of this marijuana research is that in growing marijuana, often 1,000-watt light fixtures are used because of the heat and the color quality of it. And so a 1,000-watt light fixture, I've read, can produce, or 4 of these grow fixtures can produce the same, or use the same amount of energy as 29 refrigerators. And this has been a problem in Oregon with their recreational marijuana. And considering the summer months when people have their air conditioning units on, how might that cause blackouts in San Mateo County? Pesticides such as carbofuran may also be used in home grows, potentially flushed down the drain or dumped in the backyard. So there's some environmental considerations there. Young people might be at risk for electrocution in these often poorly wired home grows with potential exposure to burns or other dangers. Another issue was potentially requiring dispensaries to provide health education and harm reduction literature and materials approved by the county health department. Also considering a potential need for harm reduction education at the high school level. In doing prevention presentations to high school teachers in their classrooms, many high school teachers have said that many of their students already use marijuana, and potentially having harm reduction education in addition to primary prevention education would be really useful.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Our last speaker is James Ray.
Hi, thank you for your time today for this important topic that I think the county can benefit from. I represent a company called the California Cannabis Company. We're serious about it in California. We've got a ton of San Mateo businessmen that want to invest in San Mateo County in this venture, this new industry. We've done a lot of R&D. I think some of the input today has been misguided. I don't know any plant that generates 10 pounds of cannabis. That seems strange. I'd love to see proof on the addiction side also. Seeing none of that. I'd like to understand why aren't we learning from Pacifica's dispensary? We have a dispensary that's been running for years in our county. Why aren't we learning from them? What's happened in Pacifica once that establishment got opened. What have we learned? We're not looking at that. The addiction, frivolous, water recycling, it should be a topic. We're generating 90% of our water, let me put it this way, a majority of our water is being recirculated, so we're not putting it back into the system. The issue of pesticides, I think the state is managing that quite well with their regulations. I've attended their regulations meeting. They are very serious about this, and they're moving fast. They've got a lot of good stuff on their plate. But we have to look at the health for our environment and our people, because the stuff that people are smoking today, terrible in pesticides, just not being tracked. We need to track and measure all aspects of it. The taxes, there's companies in Southern California that are generating 2 buildings right next to each other, adjoining buildings. Medical on one side, recreational on the other. Medical is going to be taxed lower, recreational is going to be taxed higher. They're going to cater to both sides to help battle the black market issues that's being posed also. And indoor, very expensive, but much more cost-effective long-term. So we need to look at that. Greenhouse is good, but not as cost-effective long-term. Thank you.
We have no more speakers, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Callaghan.
So in closing, I hope that you all found this very informative. I'd like to thank our staff who put in a lot of time and effort to become subject matter experts. Obviously, it will impact the county in many different ways. Still a lot of unanswered questions at the state. We'll work through those as they come available. And we'll be happy to take any direction of this board and work on it from the staff level. There was a suggestion by county council of an emergency ordinance that I'm sure Mr. Byers might have some more information on.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Callaghan. I guess going back to where we started, the immediate direction we would like from the board today, and obviously there's a lot of information that came at you, but in terms of just the direction we're looking for today, it's really twofold. One is I'd like to talk to you about whether the board is interested in staff coming back with an urgency ordinance, and I'll address that in a minute. And the second, direction we would like to get from the board is whether the board is interested in some sort of regionalization effort here, and if so, in other words, coordination with cities, and if so, how? How would you envision that? So in terms of the urgency ordinance, I guess my advice, unless a majority of the board feels strongly otherwise, my advice in this is to strongly consider an urgency ordinance for us to bring one back for your consideration. I think this is an area that the board should tread lightly in. Go slow. Things are evolving, changing very quickly in ways that, things are evolving and informing us in ways we can't predict or imagine, and will continue to do so over the next few months. If the board is interested in an urgency ordinance, we could prepare it in very short order. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Many cities and counties throughout the state have already done so. We could bring it back next Tuesday or in January, depending on your direction and your preferences. But the ordinance, what it would do is twofold. It would impose a moratorium on number one, commercial activities with regard to non-medical marijuana. So all commercial activities with regard to non-medical marijuana. We've already learned that the state's not going to license that until possibly January 2018. But nevertheless, we don't know for certain. And this ordinance, by the way, as you guys are well aware, could last as long as 2 years. So depending on how this were to play out. But so that'd be number one. And the second thing an urgency ordinance would do would be impose a moratorium on outdoor growth. At least we would bring that to you as a consideration when we bring it to you. So it's really twofold, and you could do one or both. But at least that would be the conversation. The advantages in an urgency ordinance, I think by doing so, you're really saying to your constituents, we're not saying yes and we're not saying no to long-term, commercial activities or outdoor growth. We're just, what we're doing is we're just kind of taking our time because there are a myriad of policy considerations, many of which we need to, better study and understand. So we want to take our time and we want to get it right. So, that would be sort of the message you're sending. Now, if the board feels strongly that you're ready to act on ordinance now, you can, with regard to either of those items, you can certainly go that direction as well. So that's the first issue I wanted to kind of address, have you address and think about, maybe give us feedback on. The second is the regionalization question. And I know from where I sit anyway, many city attorneys have asked me whether we'd be willing to help coordinate an effort, countywide with the cities on maybe template ordinances that we could bring to our respective legislative boards and bodies for consideration. And they could be templates that have different, that take different roads. But I know my point is there is an interest among the city attorneys in having a staff level conversation and coordinating with regard to potential ordinances that we could kick upstairs to our respective boards. So,
and I think that would be done in conjunction with the city managers and county manager's office.
Correct. Thank you. We want staff, all appropriate staff, to be involved in that, not just the attorneys.
Thank you, Mr. Byers. Mr. Callaghan, anything further?
No.
Okay. So we'll open it up to the board for a conversation about the alternatives that Mr. Byers outlined for us. Supervisor Tissier?
Just on what our county council mentioned, I think, obviously I won't be here in another month, but I do think it's probably important to take more time on this issue. And I think by doing a moratorium, as John said, it's not you're saying yes or you're saying no, but this is a lot of information to get today. And there's a lot of different issues, whether it's the health issues, whether it's dealing with our teens, or whether it's dealing with where it should be grown or not grown. I think the county really needs time to, and the board in particular, to digest the materials that are here and not move too fast. But yet again, we're not saying we're not going to do something. Obviously, the voters voted over 60% saying they wanted it. And so I think the key is, how should it be done? And I do also think that it would be good for regionalization. I mean, we've done a lot of things in this county. It makes a lot more sense than having each city do something different and nobody really knows what the next city's doing, assuming the cities are interested. And oftentimes they are, so they can, we can do this collectively. So anyway, I would suggest we go along with the county council's suggestions, because it'll give certainly more time to really ferret out all of the different aspects of this, which is quite voluminous, as we saw today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Supervisor Pine?
I would echo Supervisor Tissier's comments. First off, the complexity here and the amount of different agencies that have some degree of oversight is incredible. I mean, it's probably the Full Employment Act for many folks in government. So, one thing for sure with this, the regionalization is it'd be great if the cities could piggyback on this expertise that we have gained. I mean, the cities can't replicate this degree of, inquiry into these subjects. So, I'm sure the team and county manager could, talk about how we can share this information effectively, maybe a reduced presentation of some kind. And as has been mentioned, each city has to consider how it wants to go forward, but there's benefits in uniformity. So that's the countywide regionalization is a great idea, as is the moratorium, as for the reasons Supervisor Tissier articulated. The big issues for me as we kind of go forward with this, well, there are many issues, but, particularly the issues of how youth are vulnerable. And there's no question that we're going to have to do education for many years, as we have done with smoking. And then secondly, these edible forms, which seem like they're going to be particularly hard to deal with.
Thank you. Supervisor Groom?
Thank you, Mr. President. If I share a couple of things with you that I learned last week at the annual CSAC meeting, where I went to 3 marijuana workshops, there are, in the North County especially, counties are merging to take a circle of the map, and 3 or 4 counties working together and including their cities, so that whatever rules and regs they come up with, that it won't be different from county to county. And that seemed like a pretty good idea. A couple of other counties, again in the northern part of the state, had adopted some ordinances, and once the state was passed, they stopped their ordinances immediately and done the same thing, where put a adopted the state and said, now we're going to look at this and figure out what to do next. So they, several of them had much more lenient ordinances than the state, and stopped those and thought that they should kind of start anew. So I think that for me, the regional thing is a very good idea. There's so many unanswered questions, especially for public safety. There's no metrics yet. There's who knows if you're driving down the street and you're affected or you're not affected, because we don't have the blood kind of tests that we have for alcohol. So I think, the same with the edible piece. Ms. Forche gave us a good presentation of, but the labeling isn't done yet, the packaging isn't done, the recommended dose usages of the time aren't done, and so I think that we should wait and start deciding what is the most of interest to us. But maybe in a few more 6 months, 7 months, we'll have some more information so we can really tighten up our rules and regs. And lastly, we've had for years in this county a really exceptional smoking group that has been working through the cities and the county on how to control smoking, especially at the minors. And so I think we can learn a lot from that group as we start worrying about the youth consuming this product as well. And there's been a lot of ordinances in each city on minor smoking and retail establishment smoking. So I mean, we can learn a lot from that, I think, if we take the time to revisit that.
Thank you. Supervisor Horsley.
I am concerned about the unintended consequences of this legislation, or this action on the part of the voters. But the voters have spoken, so I guess we have to deal with it. I'm also, because I have the co-site and a number of my growers and representatives are here as well, and I do think that we do have a lot of greenhouses on the co-site, and they have been hard hit by the economy. A number of them have gone out of business, in fact, in recent years. So maybe it may well be an economic opportunity for them. So I don't want to shut that down. On the other hand, it's an awful lot of information to take in and make decisions on really quickly. So I do support the idea of a moratorium on commercial activities and also the moratorium on outdoor grows. Lastly, my experience with my partner with the cities, regionalization does appear to be the best approach to take. The cities certainly are not going to have the resources that we have, and I just think taking our time, taking a really a real slow, deliberate process actually makes a lot of sense. One thing I want to address as somebody who was in law enforcement, people keep on thinking that there's all kinds of people in jail for marijuana. That simply isn't true. It just isn't true. It hasn't been true for decades. It's true, of course, that there's a lot of illegal marijuana that comes from cartels from other countries. It's true that marijuana has proliferated, and it's unfortunate. I think it's bad public policy, but we're kind of stuck with it. So I do want to conclude by just really congratulating and thanking the staff. The information you had was just it's extremely thoughtful, well presented, and kind of scary, to be candid, especially with these manufactured products. And I was thinking about that horrible fire they had in Oakland. I just wonder, could that have been the generating factor in that fire? I don't know. I have no particular knowledge about that, but these kinds of explosions, from my limited experience, I haven't been in law enforcement for 10 years, but I do remember some of them, and they are pretty horrific. So I think it's best for us to take a go slow approach, and the idea of the concept of a moratorium, I think, is a good one.
Thank you, Supervisor. In addition to what's been said about the John Byers go slow approach, is the changes that might occur at the federal level and the developing state regulations and policies and perhaps laws that the legislature may adopt between now and then. So I think that's just another justification for that approach of doing the urgency ordinance perhaps as soon as next week.
We
if
could have it prepared as early as next Tuesday.
if we could. And then the other part, a couple of other just comments is, I'm really curious to know as we go along the costs to the county on this body of work and its implementation. I know I too would compliment the staff. They've been working, I think, for a year or if not longer on this, and it represents a lot of cross-boundary, cross-departmental kinds of concerns as we talk about zoning and health. And Heather was giving us a briefing the other day about the odors from the production, and there's just a lot to it. And it cuts across many departments. So thank you to all the staff that had a hand so far. There's a lot more ahead of us, but I think it's a great example of the kind of collaboration that goes on here within San Mateo County. And then also think that I'd like to see a way where the board, not necessarily an ad hoc committee, but could have input and advise, perhaps, if you will, this regional movement that's going to go forward. And I know Supervisor Groom has done a lot of work with CSAC on this topic and is quite knowledgeable. And there may be somebody else that wants to step forward and volunteer for that sort of thing. But I think it's important to have board input on all this as we go forward. And the other input that I would be, I don't know how to do this, maybe you give us some thought, are the representative of the growers and the coast side folks and the person that spoke about the rural issues, so that we get input from a broad array of perspectives, not just internally our own. And I don't want to rush county counsel's office at all, of course, but if we could, I'd like to see the temporary freeze come back next week so that Supervisor Tissier, who's been a strong advocate of law enforcement and criminal justice topics, has a chance to vote on that if we could. And that's that. So do we need a motion, or what do you recommend?
Technically, no, I don't need a motion. I think of the direction, there's a collective concurrence on both those items. I feel like, and Mike, I assume I won't speak for you, but I think staff, from my perspective, has enough direction to move forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's clear.
So perhaps Supervisor Pine and Supervisor Groom could be the board, I don't know what the title would be, but advisors to your group?
Well, the board has a decision to make. You could vote now as a board to create a legislative committee made up of 2 members that would, whose, scope of duties would be to advise this, regional group, or you could, or it could happen, sort of evolve more organically, but it could only be 2 members, of course. I don't see any downside in just having the board appoint a committee that would advise this regional effort.
It could be done organically.
Mr. President, maybe we can bring back some options for how you might approach the regional issue. There probably needs to be some structure in it, and I suspect we could put those options together pretty quickly and bring them back next week for your discussion on the moratorium.
That'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Maltby. Anything else on this matter? Thank you, everybody, for the presentations and for all the effort that went into this. And let's see now, we're on item 5, but Mr. Monowitz, without objection, I'm going to ask that we take item 6 ahead of you because there have been people waiting quite some time, I believe. So item 6 before item 5, if we could. And
I'll start with the introduction, and I know Louise is going to speak, and I believe Kim Gillette as well. This item in front of you for Measure A dollars is both a combination of my district Measure A money and the health department Measure A money. And this is for a project to relocate and do the tenant improvements for the Daly City Youth Health Center. This is an exciting project to date, they're really at capacity where they currently exist. And what we're looking to do is not only expand in Daly City, but to expand into South San Francisco and San Bruno. And in doing so, by moving this operation to a new building, it'll bring greater efficiency to the services that are provided to our youth. So I'm very excited that we've been able to get this far. We still have to get far enough to get the tenant improvements, but this is certainly a big step today. So I'm going to let Louise take it from here.
Good morning, President Slocum, members of the board, Mr. Maltby. I think we have Mr. Byers floating around. As Supervisor Tissier said, the proposal is to support one-time improvements at the Daly City property at 350 90th Street. And our interest is in supporting the relocation of the Daly City Youth Health Center, which includes our medical clinic as well as other components. They have a very vibrant behavioral health aspect as well, to the new location. And as a result of that move, we'll also be able, and the improvements to the property, to relocate some of the behavioral health and recovery services that are located next door at the Mike Nevin Clinic into this property as well, thus freeing up space in the Mike Nevin Clinic for other clinical services that are important to be located there. We've enjoyed a 26-year-long collaboration with the Daly City Youth Health Center. It's a partnership with the Jefferson Union High School District. It's been possible as a result of that partnership to serve more than 1,700 adolescents each year. It's more than 50,000 since the inception of the partnership. And as we look at the infrastructure for the delivery of health care in the northern part of the county and all of the changes that have occurred and all of the changes that will occur, we expect there to be an ongoing need for a teen health center, for a teen-focused community agency to provide the services that are most appropriate for young people. We don't envision creating this in a lot of other locations. It's really been the center that has served not just Daly City youth, but youth from all over northern San Mateo County, from all of the high-risk zip codes. And so we really see investing in this program to be the hub. As you all know, effective engagement of teens in healthcare requires a specialized approach. It requires connections and outreach to the schools. It requires confidentiality and trusted relationships with staff who meet youth on their own terms, and provision of relevant clinical and supportive information that helps young people navigate some of the really difficult choices that they face as young people. And this program has done that admirably. So we're hopeful that through this investment and the lease, which would be by the Jefferson Union High School District back to Daly City Youth Health Center, and we will be a subtenant. And then on the behavioral health and recovery services side, we will lease directly from the city. We believe that this new location and the outstanding partnership that we have will really anchor this service for the northern part of the county for decades to come. So Kimberly Gillette, who is the executive director of the Daly City Youth Health Center, is also here with me today, and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Does Kimberly want to speak now, or?
We can answer your questions.
Okay. Okay. Questions?
No, I just want to say what a great job Kim has done. It's really been fantastic to see the number of youth that go through there every year. And, she's sort of the one person that not only keeps operating, she's also raising the funds for this. And so the purpose here is to do as much as we can, and then we'll continue to fundraise for the remainder of the money that's going to be needed for the renovation. Kim, did you want to say something? Please feel free.
Yes, hi, thank you. Thank you for taking up this issue today. So at the Daly City Youth Health Center, we believe in the potential of all young people, and that with a little bit of help and guidance, they can be on a pathway for success. And we know that when our youth are succeeding, our community will flourish. So we really appreciate the idea of the county and all of our partners coming together to help our youth succeed and our community succeed in the future. So thank you. for your time.
And the other thing I think that this will do for us is as we go out for grants for the youth center, when you have partners, and I've been talking to other health areas, health people in different hospitals that are interested in perhaps putting some dollars in this, and well, I'm not going to say who it is just yet because it's not there yet. But I think by having that collaboration of a lot of different people, when we go after grants for the remainder of the money, I think it'll show a real strong partnership, and I think that'll give us greater opportunities as well. So this is, just one piece of the puzzle. So with that, I'm going to make a motion to approve the Measure A funding, authorizing one time of $1.423 million. That's partially district-specific funds of $423,000 and the $1 million from the health department, and then also authorizing a one-time $277,000 grant, district-specific Measure A money to the City of Daly City for the exterior renovation, which will address the ADA compliance issues in that building.
I'll second the motion.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now, we'll go back to item number 5, Mr. Monowitz.
Good afternoon, President Slocum, members of the board, and Mr. Byers. I'm here to present to you the proposed adoption of the 2016 Building Standards Code and associated amendments to the San Mateo County building regulations. First, a bit of background. The California Building Standards Commission updates the state's building codes, which includes building, fire, mechanical, plumbing, and electrical codes on a triennial cycle. The most recent code updates go in effect January 1st of 2017, and these codes form the baseline that the local governments must implement. Local governments have the opportunity to supplement the base code by adopting facts and findings based on local climatic, geologic, or topographical conditions. And the county's building regulations establish the administrative procedures that we use to implement these codes. So with regard to the changes that we are proposing in this cycle of updates, the first 3 are really clarifications and refinements intended to make our regulations operate as clearly and smoothly as possible. We've added definitions that define our local conditions. We've deleted redundant and conflicting standards. We've removed a building permit requirement for portable storage units. The reason we did that is because there's no construction involved in those, so we have no way to regulate their method of construction. We do have rules in terms of where they can be placed and how long they can stay there, but it's really not a building permit issue. But the final 2 are the most important components of this year's updates. The first allows for the use of plastic pipe plumbing within single-family and duplex dwelling units of 2 stories or less. I forgot the 2 there in that bullet. It should say 2 stories or less. This is consistent with the base code requirements, and it's an important change in that we've heard from many of our contractors and residents who have seen the previous prohibition as eliminating their ability to use current technology, which is cheaper and easier to install. And then finally, we are revising thresholds for fire sprinklers in existing buildings. We are eliminating the 50% valuation rule and instead establishing a fire safety test so that we not only stop having more onerous standards for smaller projects, but that we have a more fire-oriented basis for requiring fire sprinklers as opposed to an arbitrary number. With regard to anticipated future changes, we will be coming back to the board with supplements to the building code requirements. We are looking at the optional Tier 1 and Tier 2 standards to figure out which additional green building and energy efficiency codes we want to fold into our regulation. I'd note that the base code now includes many of the things that were previously in the county's green building ordinance. The state has now caught up, and in terms of the additional tiers, we'll be working with the Office of Sustainability to figure out what is really appropriate and cost beneficial for our region. And we'll also be coming back with you with a mandatory balcony inspection program to address some of the wear and tear that can take place on those exterior facilities and ensure their safety. So, in conclusion, I'm recommending that the board introduce an ordinance adopting the latest editions of the 2016 California Building Standards Code, repealing and replacing the San Mateo County Ordinance Code, which is our building regulations, and repealing Chapter 3.84 of the Ordinance Code by making the required findings in Attachment A and waiving the reading of the ordinance in its entirety. I do have a correction that I hope can be part of your motion, and that has to do with page 57 of the ordinance. This has to do with recycling requirements when you're doing construction. What I would like to ask the board to change is the end of the paragraph under section B, starting with source separating non-inert materials, where we'd like that section to conclude with and directing them to recycling facilities approved by the county. Okay, what this does is eliminates the following statement, which says that you need to recycle 50% of the material. That is redundant to other sections of the code, and therefore it was just a typographical error that it was included, so we'd like to make that change. I'd also just like to quickly acknowledge the hard work of Miles Hancock, who worked tirelessly to work out these changes with our contractors, our fire districts, and the plumbers union. So thanks to Miles for his hard work there. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Monowitz. Questions, comments?
I'll just make a comment. I do thank you for, it was hard work, and appreciate your reaching out to the plumbers union as well. You know, as you noted, there's an opportunity here to do supplemental additional standards, often referred to as these REACH codes, and I think that's a real opportunity for us to show leadership. Two of our communities that I'm aware of have kind of gone down this road, one being Portola Valley and the other being the city of San Mateo. So I know in Portola Valley, for example, they've are considering or have put in place requirements for solar panels or the infrastructure for solar panels. Similarly with vehicle recharging, and they've done some things with gray water. As I understand it, there's a lot of flexibility in how each jurisdiction can approach this, and so I appreciate the idea of you bringing that back. And as I think as folks know, things are going to get much tighter in 2020 when all residential buildings will have to be zero net energy. LinkedIn just opened a new facility which was zero net energy, and I've had some discussions with our building folks about what we can do in that area. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the future about what type of supplemental provisions we might add.
Good, thank you.
I don't have any questions, but I'm happy to make a motion to introduce the ordinance and add the information that Mr. Monowitz indicated on section B.
Second. Oh, if I might also add, thank you very much for working on the balcony standards. There's just been too many accidents in the last few years, and so I hope this will get us up to speed.
Thank you. Just a quick question, if I could, regarding the fire part of this. The Oakland fire is obviously on everybody's mind, and our condolences go out to everybody that was affected by that. But could you just talk about that? Is this as strong as it could be? Do we need to do more? Redwood City had a creative program where they gave low interest forgivable loans for fire sprinklers and so forth and so on. Just curious about the fire part of this change.
Sure. So with regard to the fire code, our regulations require all new construction to be sprinklered. So if you're building a new home or a new commercial or industrial facility, it will have fire sprinklers. Where the code is silent is when you're required to sprinkler existing buildings. And we previously used a system under which your addition or remodel would have to exceed a value of 50% of the current structure's value in order to trigger sprinkler requirements. In the new fire safety test that will be applied to determine whether or not sprinklers need to be installed. There's various components that will be considered, mostly related to what are the risks associated with fires to not only the structure but to the people within them. Now, as that relates to a warehouse type space like in Oakland, I think one of the problems that we face is knowing when modifications have been made to a building without permits. And so, in the event that people have made modifications without getting the tenant improvement permits required to do that, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to apply our fire sprinkler standards. But in cases where people do abide by the process, I believe our fire safety test is a step in the right direction of upgrading some of these older structures to provide appropriate fire protection. I think the most important thing is making sure that our property owners are going through the process so that we can apply those requirements as opposed to us trying to catch them later on and then make it happen after the fact.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Monas.
Supervisor Tissier, in the motion that you made, you included that recommendation, right?
Yes.
Okay,
On
great.
page 57, section B.
Perfect.
I'll second. I can't remember if we had a second or not.
Yes,
Oh, we
I
did.
agree.
Okay.
Yes.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Monowitz.
Thank you.
Good job.
Now we'll move on to item number 7, Mr. Maltby, I believe.
Mr. President and members of the board, this item would continue for a 1-year period of time our existing provisions with respect to allowing those individuals that are called to active duty that serve in Afghanistan and Iraq the ability to retain their full county benefits and, in addition, to pay them the difference between whatever their pay may be, if any, and their existing pay within the county. This is a benefit that we have extended to active duty military personnel since the Gulf War I. And I think it is very much appreciated by those individuals that are called to active duty to serve, and would recommend that you adopt this resolution.
Thank you. I know we all have received letters from the Veteran Service Officer. No, maybe not. But in any case, the Veterans Commission adopted a resolution to ask us to support this, and I think we will. But it was interesting to note earlier that Mr. Maltby said he thinks we were the first county in America to enact this type of program. So, hey, good for us. Amen.
Yeah, great.
So is there...
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to item number 8, a Measure A item, an ATR, and that will be Supervisor Horsley.
Well, as you know, there was a fire at the Pescadero Community Market some time ago, and that was a place that visitors to that community usually stopped off, and the Pescadero Municipal Advisory Council asked, because of the fact that the market is no longer available to provide bathroom services, that we would put portables for until such time as the building is reconstructed. So it's a temporary measure to serve visitors to that community. So I'll make a motion to
Second.
approve the Measure A funds.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Good idea,
Good
Mr.
idea.
Horsley. All right, we'll move to item number 9, which is another Measure A. Supervisor Tissier.
I think we all heard Raina Lehman earlier talk about this one-time grant of district-specific Measure A funds to the San Mateo County Union Community Alliance for its Trades Introduction Program. And one of the things that I had emphasized to them, it's one thing to get people into their program, but what I was hoping for, and they've already met with Melissa Wagner from the Sheriff's Office, is that they emphasize those that are coming out of our correctional facilities, especially as they're in the transition time, to see if there's interest there. And that they will be doing that. So I have gone ahead and put forth a one-time $95,000 grant for them to start a class, and I believe it starts in January. So I'll make a motion to approve that.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank
Great
you,
program.
Supervisor Tissier. Good job. Now we move to County Manager's Report, item number 10, which is the 23rd of 2016.
It is. Mr. President, members of the board, you have my report. I'll answer any questions. I do want to point out, however, for the board's to the board's attention, the sartorial splendor of the assistant clerk of the board this morning. That he's very impressive. So, I want to congratulate him.
He looks like he's going on a cruise.
He just got back from Palm Beach or something. All right, move to item number 11, board member reports. Could we start with Supervisor Groom?
Okay, I was just going to ask that we adjourn in memory of all of the men and women who lost their life in the Oakland fire.
I don't know if our flags are at half-mast, but I know Alameda County is doing so. Maybe we would entertain that also. Supervisor Horsley?
report.
No? Supervisor Tissier?
I have no older driver safety seminar reports for you today.
Supervisor Pine?
I'd just like to note that I think you're aware I served on the Select Committee on South Bay Arrivals, which was a group of 12 elected officials appointed by 3 Congress members, and we completed our work. It was really arduous and time-consuming, for over thousands and thousands of emails, hundreds of hours of meetings. I will see that each of you receives a copy of the report. Concurrent with that, the roundtable worked on another set of issues, primarily affecting departures and issues in Brisbane, Daly City, Pacifica. So they too have a report. The latter is much more technical than the one that the Select Committee prepared. But in any event, I'll see that each of you receives them, and would be happy to talk to you, offline about, kind of the high-level recommendations. The airline noise issue is really a tough one, as we know in our own experience, particularly as the traffic grows and these new navigation systems are deployed.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that the health system is doing something very creative regarding technology tomorrow, December 7th. They're actually going to have a live chat on their Facebook page as well as their Twitter accounts, and counselors will be available to answer questions that the public may have. But it seems like this may be one of the first examples of the county using social media to reach out on a very important topic, and as I said, you can probably get more information on the health system's webpage, but will be on Facebook and their Twitter account. So, good job. And with that, if there's no other business, Mr. Clerk, we will adjourn.
Adjourn to closed session.
Adjourn to closed session. Yeah.
Excuse me, President Slocum, we will not have any report out of closed session. It's going to be discussion only.
Okay, thank you.